But in any case, we've established that investment by the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund in the context of the Sovereign Wealth Fund is play money. Not quite play money, but imagine $400 million being play money, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Out of how, what is it? 1 trillion?
It's 1 trillion and 1.05 trillion. So it's
we're a rounding error.
0.04%, I think.
Yeah,
1 trillion and $5 billion.
But hey, it's something. I mean, it's a little bit of exposure.
Yeah, it's good publicity, and it normalizes the whole thing. What is so unique about Bitcoin is so many investments start off at the institutional level, and it's only retail that gets in last. And retail is the stupid shoeshine boy who's giving Joe Kennedy tips and so on. What's so brilliant about Bitcoin is it started at the retail level.
Isn't that
It
brilliant?
started with the shoeshine boy, and the institutions and the big corporations and the nations and all the rest of it are in last.
Welcome to the Runway, where we cover current events on crypto, Web3, politics, technology, and more. Welcome to the pod, boys. I've got CJ here with me.
What's up, everybody?
I've got Dominic here with me, Dominic Frisby.
Hi, folks.
And I've got Bob Burnett here with me.
Hello.
Paul, what do you have queued up for us this week?
To kick things off, we have news that Abu Dhabi has now a sovereign wealth fund
Okay.
for Bitcoin.
What do you guys think about this? Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund bought $436 million of Bitcoin in Q1 2025.
Can only be good news.
Is this a strategic Bitcoin reserve, or is this something similar to it, but not quite?
This is good news for them. It's bad news for us. We're falling behind.
That's
We're
the way it
falling
looks.
behind. We're absolutely falling behind. When you get buyers like this, they don't sell. They have no plan to sell anytime soon. And with the tools that are coming, with SAB 121 repeal, bank's going to start doing custody. They will never sell that Bitcoin. They will, and if they ever need to tap into that equity, which they probably won't, they would just borrow against it.
Speaking of that, I
gone
think
forever.
I got one of your posts tagged. We'll touch on that in a minute because I want you to unpack it.
How are you so sure that they won't ever sell?
Because they don't need to. It's Gresham's law. So you always get rid of the worst things first. I say, like, when we were kids, we would like trade cards, and you would have like a holographic card, and then you have regular, and you would tell your friends, be like, "Oh, you got a cool holographic Charizard Pokemon, and I want that because I have these holographics, but I don't want to trade you my holographic for your holographic because I'm getting equal return." Gresham's law states that I'll give you 10 of my regular cards. I'll give you 50 of my regular cards. I'll give you all of my regular cards to get the one holographic because you get rid of what's worst first. So when you look at that country and their sovereign wealth fund, Bitcoin is going to be the strongest asset on the balance sheet. So if they ever needed to sell or tap into liquidity in ways that their economy couldn't enable, then they would get rid of the worst assets first, which I think they have a pretty... Heard Trump say the other day they have one of the biggest wealth funds in the world.
I think so. And the country doesn't, it runs a massive surplus for obvious reasons because it's got all that oil. I'd like to know what else they've got in that sovereign wealth fund and what their turnover of assets is, because if Bitcoin goes up a lot, it might be that they decide to take some profits or something like that. But I agree, it's you tend to buy Bitcoin to hold it. You don't buy Bitcoin to flip it at that level.
Right. I guess just think about from your personal lives. When you got to buy something or do something, what do you want to spend, Bob? Are you going to sell your Bitcoin stash?
Well, sure, I'll sell my fiat and keep the gold, keep the Bitcoin.
That's Gresham's law in action right there.
Yeah.
What would you think they would sell it for? Like, what would they be able to buy with it that they can't leverage their oils and other cash flow?
Oh, well, I'm gonna make a suggestion, and then you're going to tell me that Bitcoin's much better, and I'm going to agree with you because I think Bitcoin is much better. But it might just be a simple asset allocation exercise that, if Bitcoin goes up and they're only supposed to be 2 or 3% in Bitcoin or whatever it is, it might just be something as simple as that. Or it might be that, they suddenly decide that they've got to be long Japan and buy, a shed load of Toyota or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? There might be some reason why they have to go into some particular asset. But yeah, I agree. It's or somebody comes into the wealth fund who just despises Bitcoin for whatever reason. But I tend to find that most people who buy Bitcoin tend to like it.
I think something that's really interesting to tap on what you said, because this is generally practiced on a global scale, is diversification, they call it, right? So the best investors in the world, you'll hear them talk about concentration. Concentration builds wealth. Diversification preserves it. So you get Bitcoin in your portfolio because Larry told you put 2% in there. 5 years later, it's 15 or 20%. And by that time, he'll probably change his mind again and say that you should be at 15 or 20% because he keeps doing that and moving it up. But going back to what you were saying, you have this rebalancing mechanism to maintain a diversified portfolio. And I think at that level,
That's how they think.
yeah, at that level, they do. That's our advantage. Like, I hope that they do that. But everybody who's like on a personal level and trying to get ahead should understand that you need to concentrate on your savings, and then your bills and your needs and your investments and your desires and your wants, they all take away from your savings. So what you earn should be your savings 100%, and then take away from your bills and needs. And whatever's left over, 100% goes into Bitcoin savings. We are not sovereign wealth funds. We need to make sure that on a personal level, we're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin's been my savings account since I learned about Bitcoin. I mean, that's pretty much how I think about Bitcoin.
I think Dominic asked a good question, which is what else is in that fund. But I'm pretty sure a 400 and something odd million investment is a little tiny taste that the odds that that's going to get rebalanced are pretty low, at least for an extended period of time. And I have an interesting stat on the network that you guys might enjoy. I just did a study recently. In early 2022, January of 2022, the average coin life, meaning the life of the average UTXO sitting in the network, was 3.85 years. It's presently over 5 years. So, there's lots of different metrics to look at, like, are people hodling? Are people selling? Well, people are hodling, and it's accelerating. To go from a 3.85-year average to a 5-year average in 3 years is a phenomenal number.
Can you just describe that statistic? So the average hold time for a Bitcoin is now 5 years.
Correct.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's a great stat.
the people who really want to see Bitcoin used as digital cash are not going to love that stat.
Is that over the last 3 years, you said? Over the last 3 years?
The change in those numbers.
It
is
means
over a
people are
3-year
holding their
period.
Bitcoin.
So it's gone up by 1.5 years in 3 years.
So you're
Correct.
observing people are starting to understand the fundamentals underlying Bitcoin and why it's such a good savings vehicle, right? And
So what'd be really interesting is, in the next 3 years, does it stay at 5 to sync with the halving cycle, or does it continue to grow?
Yeah.
Well, if it grows at the same rate and it goes from 3.5 to 5, so that's 1.5 years, which is close to a 50% increase. It's about a 40% increase. I'm just doing very quick maths, and I didn't get top grade in maths. But if it does something similar, then it's going to go from 5 to above 7 in the next 3 years.
It could. I mean, probably be some sort of diminishing returns on this. But, we know Sailor's not selling. As we said, these guys probably aren't selling. I think the sovereigns are coming in. I think they're going to come in hard.
It'll be the smaller nation sovereigns that come in.
Absolutely.
They're
They
just
will
to
be the
be-
first ones.
They're the nimblest, and they don't have to answer to as many people and all that.
Yeah. And it has a bigger impact, right?
We want Norway buying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I'm only saying that because Norway's got the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world.
Yeah.
That's why.
yeah, they do. And, sorry.
they've been
But
crushing it.
what's also,
They're quite woke, though. They might decide that Bitcoin is not green or something, despite the fact that the whole thing's funded by oil.
Well,
yeah.
we're taking advantage of their energy over there. I don't know about you, Bob, but there's some miners running over there.
There is.
Lots of
But
miners running over there.
they've vacillated, though. I'm looking at a lot of international mining opportunities right now, and what I call jurisdictional acceptance is kind of my first criteria. Like, is the political environment and the social environment amiable to what I'm trying to do? Because the last thing I want to do is go invest
in New York.
on the U.S. side. Yeah, there's about 8 or 9 states that are just off the map, as far as I'm concerned.
Which one? Which are?
The whole West Coast: Washington, Oregon, California, Illinois, Massachusetts, New York.
Can't do business there.
All those. Like, I
What's
can't
the good
do it
ones?
Texas, Wyoming, Florida, Dakotas.
Okay.
Probably a couple.
And they've got
a couple
energy.
more. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah.
Something I'm missing?
Well, No, I mean, that's the general idea. I think there are others. I think, Ohio's okay. I think Pennsylvania's okay.
I've got infrastructure in North Carolina.
I've got something in South Carolina.
Uh-huh.
So, there's some that are better than others. Texas is interesting. I had a conversation this morning. Honestly, I think the industry is getting too concentrated in Texas. And there's a certain level of complacency or comfort that I think is dangerous. So, I'll give you an example. We're sitting in this world with Trump, right? And I think everybody's feeling really good in the Bitcoin community. I think the people in Texas think they have a great governor, all that sort of stuff. But Trump could turn on Bitcoin. I'm not saying that he will, but he could turn on Bitcoin. We could talk about why he might at some point. But we could hit the midterms or we could hit the next election. And it's a non-zero possibility that, let's say, Beto O'Rourke, who was the guy who tried to run against Abbott last time, wins. I could see that. And if that happens, if it coincides with, let's say, another event like they had in Texas a few years ago where the grid got really wonky, I could see a big both political and social resistance to mining come even in Texas. So, like for me, we're in South Dakota, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, South Carolina. And there's beyond each of those being pretty good deals, and I have several sites in some of them, there's a reason why I'm spread out across all those states, because I think at any one time, one of them could flip and become unfriendly to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I look back at the China mining ban, though, that hash rate got out fast, right? Like the premiums to cost were drained very quickly, and all that liquidity was used to relocate. I think a lot went to Kazakhstan, if I remember correctly.
Briefly, then Kazakhstan
screwed over.
Screw you guys.
I know some Chinese miners that I was talking to at the time, and they were like, some of them got the shit out of there, but some of them were literally like, they had like a box truck, and they would like pack up all their miners, and they would just travel around to different locations. And he was like texting
Never
me.
too long in one
I'm like
space.
messaging him, I'm like, hey, I need some of these. He's like, sorry. He's like, we're packing up the government's like on our ass, so we're gonna move over to this province. So I have it on good authority that China, the most oppressive, communist style, like authoritarian nation on earth, they basically said no more mining. And, eventually a lot of hash rate fled and moved around, but apparently there's actually more hash rate there now than there was before the ban. Did you hear that, Bob?
Similar.
Yeah.
Similar.
Fascinating.
Also, at one point, 90% of mining took place in China.
I would, 90%
that
might be a little high, but
a lower hash
majority.
rate.
Over
Majority.
half.
Over half.
It was the majority. Yeah.
Over half.
And overnight, just like that. So I do think that you're right. There is location, especially if you are paying costs to earn the subsidy, right? And you have to relocate and do all those things. But for the regular Bitcoin holder, it just proves the resiliency of the network. Of being able to, you're forced to move, and it creates problems for you. It kicks into the miners' profits. But for the everyday hodler, it probably is like a great opportunity to buy those discounted sats that were forced sold by the miners who have to relocate.
Very, very possible. Yeah. Or that equipment too. That was part of what happened. Was a lot of people entered the mining business buying those distressed assets from the Chinese miners who had to flee.
Yeah. I remember I bought a whole docket, and I never even got plugged them in, because when price went back up to 70, I was like, just take the pallet, no problem. Because I knew it was a panic. You guys have to buy the blood, right? That's the practice. Buy the blood.
I do think this is. I hear what you said about Abu Dhabi, and the fact that they're buying Bitcoin means there's less Bitcoin available, which is bad for the United States, because they're going to have to pay more for their Bitcoin when this strategic reserve eventually happens, if it happens. But I still think it's net positive for the space. It's one more sovereign wealth fund getting involved. If it works for that sovereign wealth fund, other sovereign wealth funds are going to go, we need to do this.
Absolutely.
And
Game theory.
it's a good advert, and the more people that do it, the better, and the quicker they do it, the better. And so, it's a net positive for the space.
They're not small either. El Salvador is small. Like buying one Bitcoin per day.
You have to distinguish between the sovereign wealth fund and the government.
That's what I was asking.
They're not always the same thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was curious about.
And Abu Dhabi, obviously, it's big in the sense that it's got a lot of money. And we should probably find out how much is the total value
Bob,
of the.
I think it's over $1 trillion.
Do you have miners there, Bob?
But
I do. I
but
do.
in the global
Run really nice. I
as
do a good job there.
And Abu Dhabi is obviously a strategic place because it's the other thing is it's an emirate. It's not a country. It's an emirate. But it's obviously an important strategic place because of all the oil. But in terms of like, how many people there are in Abu Dhabi and the size of even the UAE, all of the Emirates, it's still a small country. It's not a big. It's a big country because of its wealth, but it's not Germany or France or Britain or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they did 400 million. So that's
a big ass allocation, right?
no, it's 1
trillion.
Yeah. So it's well,
CJ's
One-
mic was up.
a trillion is 1,000. How big is the fund?
1
trillion.
trillion. 1 trillion.
So 400 million would be 0.04%. Yeah, so it's tiny.
It'd
Right.
be
That was why I
nice
say it's a taste, right? A
buy
taste.
4,000 Bitcoin for tiny.
Yeah. Well, the
4,000.
fund is a trillion. Well, Bitcoin's got a $2 trillion market cap. So
But in any case, we've established that investment by the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund in the context of the Sovereign Wealth Fund is play money. Not quite play money, but imagine $400 million being play money, but you know what I mean?
yes.
Out of what is it? 1 trillion?
It's 1 trillion and 1.05 trillion. So,
Okay.
so it's
We're a rounding error. But hey,
0.04%, I think is
Exactly.
what
$1
it is.
trillion and $5 billion.
but hey, it's something. I mean, it's a little bit of exposure.
Yeah, it's good publicity and it normalizes the whole thing. We were talking about this last night at the Fort Myers Bitcoin meetup, where I was talking about it, and anyone who was still standing could listen to me. But I was just talking about the fact that what is so unique about Bitcoin is so many investments start off at the institutional level, and it's only retail that gets in last. And, retail is the stupid shoeshine boy who's giving Joe Kennedy tips and so on. What's so brilliant about Bitcoin is it started at the retail level.
Isn't that
It
brilliant?
started with the shoeshine boy. And the institutions and the big corporations and the nations and all the rest of it are in last. And I just think there's a lot of people, snotty-nosed people in those institutions who resent the fact that so many smelly retail investors have got rich.
Us plebeians.
And have, exposed the shortcomings of their own funds by simply holding Bitcoin and beating, their clever quant this and analyst that and all the other things they do to manage money. So I think there's just a lot of resentment there. And they feel that by now investing in it, even 10 years later at these much higher prices, they're, psychologically, it's a big ask for a lot of those people to eat humble pie. They don't want to eat humble pie. They're cleverer. So that's a big psychological barrier that Bitcoin has to get over. But of course,
I call it the Peter Schiff barrier.
It's the Peter Schiff problem. But every time
Peter Schiff problem.
but every time you do
textbooks.
it, yeah, it will be. It's going to be a psychological condition that the great psychologists of our age will study in great depth and write tomes of material about this man who refuses to see what's blatantly obvious in front of him. But in any case,
Peter Schiff syndrome. That's what.
Yes,
Peter Schiff syndrome.
Yeah.
But in any
We're going
case,
to trademark that.
there is this big ask to get over. And I do think as soon as somebody buys Bitcoin, something happens in your brain and you just suddenly become a convert and you always feel like you're paying too much for Bitcoin. Even when it was $1, you felt like you were overpaying for it. It's just part of the process. But so, the more people that get over this barrier, the better. But this is a hurdle.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think, and we were joking about it, but I think they will seriously study this. And I think the only thing I can think of similar to it is an atheist that converts. Like if you look at Russell Brand right now as an example, and you look at what, the lifestyle and that he lived before, and then what he's become now, and he becomes like this preacher almost now in the space of a couple of years. And I think that happens with a lot of Bitcoiners. Like once you accept that you were wrong, and all of us were wrong to some degree. I was wrong until 2017, which is when I got in. We all have our epiphany moment, right? But it's hard to accept that you were wrong before because you realize what you missed.
I'm not even sure it comes down to eating the humble pie. I think you said something interesting that you said Bitcoin changes you. it comes down to economic incentive, right? Because even when I first got in Bitcoin and bought my Bitcoin, I did not know what the hell I was doing or what I owned. It took the economic incentive of accurate savings technology, right? You can't save. We're forced to spend and invest because there is no savings vehicle right now. If you're lending your money to the government at 4.5% and prices are going up minimum 10%, you're losing in real terms. You're losing purchasing power. So naturally, even if you don't run a business and you're on a personal level, you start to realize, oh, I saved up 10,000, but now to go on that cruise, it costs 14,000. So what the hell? I can't even go. What's the point? And you start, your time frames become smaller and you start spending. But when you save Bitcoin, now you can go on 2 cruises the next year, right?
One hopes, and at some stage in the future will own the cruise liner.
Yeah.
But the what you described though was yourself. And when, as a retail investor, when you first invest in Bitcoin, all you're dealing with is yourself, and there's the risk to you that you will lose your capital. It's what we're talking about here is career risk. And that's a very different thing. And there's a lot of how you're perceived as well. And career risk is a big thing. Yeah. And in fact, I think it's one of the reasons why politics is such a mess, because I mean, not in the US, but in Europe, nobody will stand up for anything because of career risk.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Shift arrangements.
I just talked with
Jeff
Walton the other day. Punter Jeff, the MicroStrategy guy. He's a genius. And he worked in reinsurance. Same thing. He would be talking about integrating Bitcoin, using MicroStrategies, convertible bonds, using these new instruments to solve the problem that the insurance company is facing, especially in reinsurance markets. And they would just laugh at him.
Yeah. I think even with Michael Saylor is, he's even though, he's a billionaire and he's got a NASDAQ listed company, he's still an outsider. He's not an institutional guy because he's such a maverick. And I thought when he was doing what he was doing, loads of companies would see how well MicroStrategy has done and copy them, and they haven't. And I think it's just because he's such a maverick that he's still, it needs kind of more boring people to do it and less charismatic people to do it for the herd to get on board.
Which brings us to CJ's post. I flagged this so we could talk about it because I saw this. You posted this, CJ, where you're talking about municipal Bitcoin bonds, because I know you're starting your new company, the People's Reserve, right? And you guys are going to be working on this. And Dominic, we spoke about this yesterday, I think with Larry, where we were talking about the company that was called Bold. I think it was called Bold, where it has a combination of gold and Bitcoin. And it really reduces the volatility. So CJ, do you want to unpack and explain kind of what you're talking about here?
Yeah, sure. And I do think it actually ties into what you were just saying, because you said it starts with retail and moves its way up. And that's what we're seeing with the strategic Bitcoin reserve, because most people are looking at the federal level. But at People's Reserve, we kind of have a little inside track because we're communicating with these officials. And upwards of, I think it's more than 15 states now. I think it's 16 states. A couple, though, failed. So I think it's 14 states have active legislation going along the path to actually creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And just like Bitcoin starts out at retail and is moving up, it's just going to start out at the state level and move up to federal level. The states can move a lot faster. And a lot of it, like here in Florida, our session is upcoming. So the bill is going to be heard. So the states can move a lot faster than the federal government. And it's going to start at the state level. And the first state, the point I was trying to make here was, I commented that under Governor DeSantis, he just gave the police and the firefighters and the EMTs a raise, which is important, right? Because I always say you can't, look, if you want your police to enforce the law, then you have to pay them to take that risk with their life. You can't, they'll look the other way if they're not getting remunerated properly. And then, if you want your kids to be smart and not be last in education, then you should pay your teachers they're not babysitters, and that you actually want them to educate your children. So
how do we fix that real quickly? Because I know that there's been so much, I don't want to distract you from your topic, but it's so important because it looks like we're spending so much more money on education system. And we know we looked at that chart.
That's a universal basic income chart. Yeah. If you look at that education chart that Elon shared, that is universal basic income. The amount of employees in the education system up, almost like a Bitcoin chart.
Yeah.
And then the amount of money invested up like a Bitcoin chart. And then the productivity is flatlined or even declined.
It's declined. It's gone
so
down.
That's universal basic income. People come in, they clock, they get their paycheck. They don't give a shit about your kid. Why would they? They're barely making any money anyway. And they clock out and then it is what it is. So you invest all this money, people show up, clock in, clock out, and you get no results. That is universal basic income. So it's kind of off topic from what this is, but I think this is really interesting because Elon's going in and finding out all this stuff, and the Fed, who is data dependent, looking at the employment numbers. What's going to happen when all this employment filters through to the numbers? I mean, there's so many government employees, and if the Fed is data dependent, I mean, rates are going to go back down to zero very quick.
Well, we've already found out though that the data is not the data. They've already revised all the Biden job reports and pulled over 500,000 jobs.
You mean they lied about everything, Bob?
Yeah,
Bob, it's worse than that though.
No way, Bob.
I don't know if you heard of Govflation.
Trueflation, isn't it? Trueflation?
Yeah, Trueflation sucks.
Okay.
That's why we built Govflation.
Oh, Govflation. Oh, yeah, that was the one you I remember now. I remember now. Okay.
Numbers. Yeah, it's government equations, but it's just the ones that were actually like working, right? Before all the changes came.
Yeah.
The financial wizards.
So you go back to that. I use those numbers in my analysis.
You showed me
I'm
that
making
when we had
portfolio decisions. I use the government numbers. Are you kidding me? How stupid could you be? It's not right. But yeah, I mean, how do you fix it though? So sorry, tangent. But how do you fix it? I think this is what you do. You create a municipal, and then you get the state of Florida, which depending on who the issuer is, you can get a AAA credit in Florida, which is better than the federal government. And now you've integrated Bitcoin into the debt net. You're going to attract billions of dollars. They used to talk about Build Back Better, but really it's Make America Great Again. You want to make America great again, you need this product. Because when you build this product, now you take the pensions and you start to buy this product. So when a teacher can work for 10, 15 years and retire early because of the performance of their pension, you're going to get some really good teachers. You're going to have your choice of the litter is what I'm trying to say. Right now, it's like you might end up in a teaching role. How many people do you think actually want to be a teacher that are teachers?
I don't know the stats for the US, but I do know the stats for England, and they are terrible. And, once upon a time, to be a teacher or a tutor was a noble profession that was seen in the same way as maybe a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, equal status. And, Aristotle was a tutor. Adam Smith was a tutor. All these great philosophers and thinkers were teachers.
Yeah.
And that kind of, and I guess you could say Jordan Peterson was a teacher, but I think he's kind of, the exception that proves the rule, if you like. And he just what, he was projected out of his teaching job just because his videos just went enormously viral on the internet. And in fact, if you look at the internet, the most watched videos on YouTube by a country mile are educational videos. Even if it's just how to fix the pipe in your tap, something like that. They're all educational. People want to learn. And the first thing people spend money on after they've got clothing, housing, and shelter is self-improvement, education. It is that fundamental. And so it is insane that we have this situation where teachers in the UK, and I bet it's the same, I bet the schools these schools in the US are a bit better than what we've got in the UK, but they have the fastest dropout rate. It's really common for somebody to go, they don't know what they want to do in their 20s, but they know they want to help in some way, so they decide they're going to become a teacher. They do their teacher training, they go and work in a school, and 2 years later they drop out because it's just a horrible existence. And on the other hand, parents overburden teachers with unreasonable expectations. They expect they're going to transform their child's life. And a lot of the time, if a teacher's looking after 30 kids in a class or 25 kids in a class, it literally is just as and all of differing abilities and different behavioral things and different cultures and different this and different that. It's just an exercise in crowd control, really.
Yeah.
Government daycare is what I call it.
It's what it is. It's what it is.
Yeah. But if you take that though, and you say, hey, you know what? Instead of making
for crap pay
$35,000, $40,000 a year, now we can pay you $50,000, but because we've taken this pension and we've invested in this municipal Bitcoin bond, we anticipate that you'll be able to earn this amount of money in your retirement over this amount of years. So although you don't get the highest quality of life and standard of living like a doctor or a lawyer, you do get a pretty decent standard of living. But the doctor and the lawyer, they have to work longer to pay off their debts.
Can you explain the whole bond? Because a lot of people probably listening have no clue what you're talking about. Can you explain how the bond works? Because the way you explained it to me, it reminded me of this thing called Bold, where it was like, 30-40% Bitcoin and then 70%
Bite tree.
gold.
Bite tree.
But what he's explaining is like a bond that it can't lose value. Like you're still going to get like the US dollar equivalent at the end of it, but it has the upside of
There's
Bitcoin.
so many different variations to it.
Of
It just depends what
variations,
problem are you facing. Like here in the United States, the interest rates are too high. The deficit forces us to borrow and make the deficit even larger, which then makes the inflation worse. So if you want lower interest rates, you integrate Bitcoin into the bond, which then produces a better rate of return. So you can actually pay a lower interest rate because the lender is actually still going to get a positive real rate of return because of the performance of Bitcoin. So you could structure it in many different ways. The way that I prefer to structure it, or at least one of our structures, is based more on cash flow. Because a lot of people that I deal with, they want cash flow. They want to get out of the rat race. They just don't want to go clock in and clock out. They're tired of it. They can't get ahead that way. But when Bitcoin gets you ahead, you can take a portion of that equity and roll it into this principal protected note. That's the actual financial term. It's not, we call it a Bitcoin bond because it describes the instrument more easily. You say principal protected note, people are like, who cares? You say Bitcoin bond, like, oh, I'd like to learn more. But the way that it's structured is like, let's say you take a $100 million investment. And typically right now where interest rates are at 4.5% on a 5-year note, you're going to put $80 million into that. It's an 80-20 split. And the split is, that proportion is always based on principal protection. You want the original investment amount, $100 million, to be protected by the government printers, by the full faith and credit of the government. Because even though we feel a certain way about that, pensions and there's a prudent man rule, there's a lot of things that go on where that's the debt instrument that's going to be used. So what happens over 5 years with the interest applied is the 80 million matures at $100 million value. So even if Bitcoin goes to zero, you're going to get back your $100 million. There is 100% downside protection. That's really important for pension plans, insurance companies, even small and medium-sized businesses. Now what's left over is the Bitcoin allocation. And this is where the magic really happens. But this is why we call it a Bitcoin bond, because it's the performance of Bitcoin that pays the yield on the bond itself. So now what's left over for Bitcoin produces the yield. And here's just some of the numbers.
You're getting a negative real return anyway.
If
you just get the 4.5%, if you put the whole 100 million in for, at 4.5%, like inflation's like 15% if you go to shadow stats and really look at the real data that they try to hide from you.
So, so you got negative 15% real rate of return instead of negative 10%. But what you've done is, if Bitcoin does what people like us think it's going to do, you've now gotten the exposure to the upside of Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin price stays the same, it matures at 120 million, which in simple interest terms is 4% APY. And you're only getting 4.5%. You're giving up 50 basis points to get the infinite upside potential, and you still have the downside risk.
So the only person who wouldn't like this is someone with shift derangement syndrome.
But if Bitcoin keeps its 60% CAGR, that means in 5 years it goes 10x. So that bond would mature at a $300 million value. That's 40% APY. And even if CAGR gets cut in half to Michael Saylor's long-term 30% target, that's a 5x. So that's 20% APY. So a municipal Bitcoin bond with AAA backing from a state like Florida could actually pay realistically between 20 and 40% APY. Now you can imagine you get all this extra purchasing power to incentivize the teachers, the policemen, and the firefighters, and the EMTs, and you take your pensions, and you take your state budgets, and you take your wealth funds, and you invest in this tool because you have downside protection in the debt instrument that you know that you want to hold, but then you get the upside benefits of the best performing asset in the world.
It's like a zero risk setup with a massively asymmetric upside. I mean,
and it's huge. It's really big. It's really big. Like, that's how you fix the problem. You can fund government this way. You can actually fund government this way. But it solves a bigger problem, I think, for small and medium-sized businesses. Small and medium-sized businesses, we have not seen them pick up adoption of Bitcoin. And the reason is because if you run a smaller, medium-sized business, you need all of that revenue to reinvest into your business, to grow out your employees, for research and development of new products and services. You can't have a portion of your balance sheet as trapped equity. You need access to your full balance sheet at all times. And the other thing is imagine if your business is doing really good, it's growing, you're hiring people, but your balance sheet is negative because Bitcoin went down 30% over the last quarter or something. And it's like, what the heck? My numbers are up, but my equity value is down. So adding this, if the state of Florida were to do this, a small or medium-sized business would hop on this immediately because they have the downside protection of the principal protected note, but they have the exposure to Bitcoin that makes sense, that allows their business to expand and outcompete the other people who haven't adopted this tool that we're building. I think it's going to play a big role. I do.
I think it's extremely interesting. I want to introduce you to a buddy of mine who sells bonds.
Oh.
And I think that he just got hired at a new startup, and they're a startup company doing bonds. So I think I want to put you guys in the room together to talk.
Yeah.
Because I feel like offering this product sounds pretty fucking interesting. This could be your sales team.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to that.
So many years ago, I wrote a film that was very popular on the internet called Four Horsemen. And it was this idea of the Four Horsemen. It was a film all about economic reform and how it came in the wake of the financial crisis, how we need to fix the world and so on. And one of the big arguments of the film was that we need to get rid of, we need to return to sound money.
Mm-hmm.
But another of the big arguments was that corporate lobbying in the United States is a big, big problem. And the influence of corporate lobbying is not good. And I think that's one of the reasons that your food is so unhealthy and your pharmaceutical companies have such undue influence, and it's a big problem. But then over New Year I went to Saylor's party, the Bitcoin party, and I discovered how much crypto lobbying had gone on into this latest election campaign, and how much influence the crypto lobby had. And obviously I want the crypto lobby to have a lot of influence, because I want the United States to have a strategic Bitcoin fund, because it legitimizes my Bitcoin investment. It puts it on the map. It normalizes it. And, if the United States has a big Bitcoin strategic reserve, that's going to benefit my portfolio considerably. So I'm a total hypocrite in that regard. And then I suppose you could say, well, some lobbying is good. And if it's a good lobby because it's because it's persuading the United States to buy Bitcoin, then that's a good thing. Well, maybe, but it's still corporate lobbying.
It's a double-edged sword for sure.
So I'd be interested, as three Americans, what you think about that.
I think we all face the same problem. I know I do, because I think, and we go through a phase. I think, like I'll talk my personal experience. It was a phase. When I first got Bitcoin, it was almost a fuck you establishment sort of thing, right? And I've been an Austrian thought guy for 25 years now, because of some things that happened earlier in my life that really pissed me off. Well, so I went through that, but then I started realizing that Bitcoin can't fulfill its goal of being the world's money and exclude nation states and big banks and corporations and all those sort of things. Like, those are diametrically opposed. You can't just say, well, it's only for the people, but it's the world's money. So then, as my business started growing too, I realized that there were groups, I'll give examples, like the Digital Chamber, the Bitcoin Policy Institute, the Satoshi Action Fund, all organizations that I've ultimately become involved with or given money to at some point, because I realized we had to fight. But the emotional me that's still back in that first place, and I feel almost like a traitor to myself. So I'm echoing exactly what you said, but I think in the end it's what we have to do. Like, these groups are important.
No, you're saying it's the way the world works.
It's the way the world works.
Don't hate the player,
it just,
hate the game.
And I'm at a point in my life, I'm 60, where, and I've had some reasonable fortune in my life. I want to make more money, but Bitcoin is a mission for me. The main reason I get out of bed every day and work on this stuff and everything that I do is for my grandkids and the future. That's my main motivator. But I've never been a money motivated person anyway. I've always been motivated by technology and being involved with technology and developing technology. But I think, like I said, I mean, we're going to have to adopt whether it's the sovereign wealth funds, nation state mining, BlackRock running an ETF, whatever. Those are all part of the maturation. We don't get to the end goal without that shit happening.
When I wrote my book on Bitcoin, long 10, 11, 12 years ago now, you always have to go through this thing, what is Bitcoin? And one of the definitions that I liked is that Bitcoin with a small b is a currency, and Bitcoin with a big B is a movement. And I used to like that because it kind of is a movement.
I like that too.
And it goes back to what you were saying about Russell Brand, getting religion. It is maybe not a religion, but it is a new belief system. And accompanying that belief system of Bitcoin, sound money, looking after yourself, taking responsibility, family values, eating good food, community, all these quite healthy, traditional religious values, really. But it is a religion. And I suppose your moment of conversion is when you get sent your first Bitcoins, or probably when you actually buy your first Bitcoins. That is your induction into the religion, if you like. And it's and you do go to meetups, and people are terribly supportive, and and I think, but at the same time, the fact that it is a religion alienates non-believers. And so it is a conversion thing. We talk about orange pilling people. It is a conversion. And so I'm thinking about how they, for example, how they spread the word of the Lord, and when the missionaries went into Africa and the missionaries went into South America along with the armies and spread the word of the Lord. But here's an interesting parallel. I'm just literally thinking out loud. But if I ask you three a question, why, of all the religions that existed in ancient Mesopotamia thousands and thousands of years ago, why did Judaism survive? Let me ask you that question. Anyone got an answer for me? I'll tell you. Okay, the answer is they wrote it down.
I knew the answer, but I didn't want to expose it.
They wrote it down, so they kept a written record of it, and all the other religions were passed on orally. So because of that record, Judaism survived.
Speaking of which,
and then similarly, we go into Northern Europe. Why did Christianity replace all the pagan religions of Northern Europe in the Dark Ages? And it's exactly the same religion. All the pagan religions were passed down orally. And, many of them are great. You've got Odin, you've got Loki, you've got Thor, fucking great religions. But Christianity, do you know what I mean? And Christianity did this thing where it did what you said. It absorbed some of the good bits, like, this midwinter festival's a good idea. Let's stick that in.
It's Jesus' birthday.
Yeah, and we'll just change the birthday and we'll get that in. But the main reason, again, was Christianity had the Bible, the written record of it. And so that written record enabled that religion to supersede the others. And of course, backing Bitcoin, we have the mother of all records in the blockchain. Yeah. And it's I have to pay if I want a bank statement from 2 years ago. It's a big problem. I can just go straight on the blockchain and get it for free.
I'll counterpoint you on that. Here's what I would say. It's not just that it was written down; it's that it's true, right? Because we have a 1 million shitcoin blockchain ledgers too, which are going to disappear and go away because it's not a truth ledger. It's just a ledger of shit coins and scam coins. So I think there has to be an element of truth to it as well, which Bitcoin has that element.
Yeah, probably.
Right? So it's not just that the written word of the Lord was written down. It's that the ideas and the practices have actually proven themselves true throughout time.
Yeah, Judeo-Christianity.
Like Thor, give Thor some money and some thunderbolts are going to come down. It never happened, ever. Not one time. But some people have prayed for their family member and they lived. So results matter too, I think.
Maybe. I mean, I accept your argument that what is truth? Truth changes, and it's an ever evolving thing. But the fact that Judaism and Christianity, and they are kind of piece of the same.
I was trying to stop
Judeo-Christianity.
I want them to watch our book series. So I was going to tell you not to give all the goods away before.
Well, I haven't given. I think I've said it. But the fact that they have survived and thrived means it could be that there's a truth to them, or there is something about them that has persuaded billions of people.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, there were stories selected from many stories that came and founded the Bible, right? It was the Council of Trent where they decided, hey, these stories we feel are true, and we're going to put them, by the divinity of God or whoever, we're picking these stories, and this is the testimony in the Word, and formed the Bible, right? So, but it is interesting.
The money is
how
God's.
it is interesting how they added.
See,
they took the winter solstice and said this is Jesus' birthday because they knew the population there. It would be easier to convert them if you use that holiday that they were already celebrating, the Christmas tree and all this stuff. Hey, this is Jesus' birthday, so it was easy to adapt some of the things to that.
To Dominic's point, though, I think if you look at Bitcoin as a religion, it even has advantages over Christianity in that we don't have disputes, for instance, about what version of the white paper is the right one. Like in Christianity, or for instance, there's a ton of books that were not included in the Bible, different interpretations,
different translations.
Like we have a true original document that we all can agree on, and then we have the blockchain itself, which is the permanent record of events from the Genesis block.
I'm going to blow your mind after this, Bob.
And I believe, and I don't want to take this. We can go wherever we want, right? I have a paper I'm working on. It's on the power of the Trinity, and this is a secular thing, by the way. But my premise is that the Trinity is the most powerful organizational structure ever created, and that Bitcoin is created in the image of the Trinity, with the white paper as the creator, with the miners and the nodes acting as the executor, the equivalent of Christ, and the plebs acting as the Holy Ghost and the consciousness, like to keep us honest. So anyway, there's a lot there. You may agree or disagree with what I just said about the Trinity, but this concept of it as a religion is I think very powerful. And it doesn't mean we worship it, but I think the way it affects our lives is in parallel.
Trump, Musk, and Vance.
There you go.
I think when I think about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, it honestly does remind me of religion in the sense that there's this initial, which was Bitcoin, which you have the Catholic Church, and then you've got all these different shit coins, and you've got all these different forms and vectors of Christianity and split offs, and and I just think in my head like, oh well, Jesus really meant this, or this guy really meant this, and we're going to form this whole new religion, off of this thing. And I hear people in my head now, like talking about Bitcoin. Well, Satoshi really meant this in this forum, and we need to have bigger blocks, and he wanted digital cash in this post. So you've got all these different things, but it's just kind of fascinating if you look at the schism and the split, and it actually even follows too, because if you've got, I think first it was like Litecoin and some of them, and they kept the initial code that Satoshi used and just altered some parameters. And it's very similar to when Catholicism switched to like the Luthers and the Protestants. And then now you've got all this way down, and you've got, entirely new blockchains, and you've got the
Bitcoin
the
Cash,
Jehovah's,
the
the Jehovah's with, no, that's Bitcoin Satoshi's vision.
Oh, okay,
it's like
sorry.
So you see what I'm saying here? I mean, there really is a strong analogy there for a religious type of setup. And if you follow how normal religions have, splintered off and formed, and, it is fascinating because it is very similar to how different cryptocurrencies have sort of merged from different communities. And you've got this group of people, and half of them disagree and half of them agree, like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, right? We want bigger blocks and we want smaller. We want to keep the blocks the same. And it's like this schism, and it just, boom, another split. And that's really similar to how religions form through time.
Well, let's hope that we don't do what Christianity did, because I think it goes back to what you're saying about the corporate lobbying. Like, yeah, like in our gut, we know it's not right. Like these people are using money to buy people and manipulate ideas, and you're anti that idea. But what we've done is we've removed ourselves from the conversation. And then when we removed ourselves from the conversation, the other people who don't feel that way, who thought, if I have money, I'm going to manipulate the politician. I'm going to buy the politician. I'm going to do this. Well, look what's happened. We have transvestites dancing in front of children in libraries. Do I need to say anything fucking else besides that? See how far we've fallen? Because we didn't apply that mindset. I think if we're going to make this connection, which I actually really like, I think Bitcoiners need to learn a lesson from Christians. Don't sit back and be too conservative.
I think
be
so.
aggressive.
The world one of the reasons why the West has fallen, is falling, is the disappearance of Christianity, the disappearance of a coherent belief system that everyone abided by, and it's partly the rise of secularism, and there's all sorts of reasons for it, and the decaying of standards and the falling away of culture, and there's a million different reasons for it. But maybe Bitcoin fixes this as well.
I hope so. We need to be more aggressive. We need to tell these people, and we're at a weird point in time too, because
there is this crossover between people who are really, really pro Bitcoin and live the Bitcoin life with high standards and all the rest of it, and traditional Judeo-Christian family values. There is a massive crossover between the two. I mean, there's sort of the guy who's made his millions and he's just gone to the Caribbean and he's spending his life partying and taking drugs and doing all the things that go with that, which maybe not is what Satoshi intended. But
Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
That's Satoshi's vision.
Yeah,
That was Satoshi's vision. He said so in the white paper.
I mean, it's it's surprisingly wholesome for a speculative, normally speculative assets. And I know I'm demeaning it by calling it a speculative asset, but that's what attracts people in the first place. They come in for the money, and then something happens along
There's
the
a
way.
famous quote. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's something to the effect of like, Bitcoin looks like a get rich Ponzi. You come to Bitcoin because you want to participate in a get rich quick Ponzi scheme, and then you realize this is like the greatest thing ever, and it's like this genius innovation and ideas of computer science and all these different things wrapped up into like what appears to like the average person as just like a get rich Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, speculative assets have always attracted
If you can pull it that
scoundrels
cool
and rip-off merchants and lies and Ponzi schemes and bubbles and all those things, dodgy mining companies and fraudulent accounts and, bankman-free kind of stuff. Speculative assets.
You met Richard Hart, right?
I have met Richard Hart.
Let's hear about it.
But speculative assets have always attracted these kind of things and these kind of people. But there's never been anything like shitcoins for all that kind of stuff, and the rug pulls and the meme coins and all the rest of it. But Bitcoin itself, in amongst all of that, is surprisingly true and surprisingly wholesome.
And I think the people at its core, remember that stat I gave you earlier, that the average coin life is increasing. That doesn't happen in a Ponzi.
No,
and
in a speculative thing. It's
right, or a speculative thing. So people, if the average, the mean, is a 5-year hold, how many new all-time highs have we hit in the last 5 years? And an order of magnitude all-time high, and they didn't sell. So if it was a Ponzi, if it was speculative, if people weren't in it predominantly for the reasons we were talking about, they would be gone.
Maybe that's why it's the better converter, because in Christianity you have to eat the humble pie, but in Bitcoin you're literally bringing the speculators, you're bringing the riffraff.
That was all by design too. Did you
and
know
then
that?
Once you get them, it like Bitcoin changes you, right? Like it changes no doubt. When I first got in Bitcoin, I thought, oh, I'm going to press the buy and sell button, I'm going to be rich.
There are conversations on this on the Bitcoin talk forums, I believe, and Satoshi was involved in some of these conversations, talking about this very concept. Like, hey, like people are going to come because this is our marketing plan. I don't know the exact quotes, but when I was reading through every single post that Satoshi ever made, I remember reading a conversation about that between a couple people, and Satoshi was kind of involved. But the idea was that this was going to be its marketing plan to attract people to come to Bitcoin, and sure enough, the game theory behind that is extremely sound.
Yeah, because what you find out is that it's not speculative, right? So you said I don't need to mean this because already, but what they don't know that, so they come and it's speculative. But to us, like I like to call Bitcoin engineered money.
Yeah, once you've done your due diligence and your research,
it's freaking alive with the difficulty adjustment. It is a self-regulating network.
Once I did my research,
technologically the best form of money that has ever existed.
Yeah,
once you go
maybe the first. I like to go that far. I say it's the first form of money.
I mean,
we've used commodities before. We never had an engineered, like in other words, light is a light bulb, but it's a different type of light than fire, right? So you go from a candle to an engineered version of it into a light bulb. Then we have gold, which is like a natural money, just like the candle was a natural light.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have an engineered money, and it's the first of its kind. It's a different type of light.
I argue, like when I look at fiat, And you just go, how have they been able to debase it like this for as long as they have? And I think one of the reasons that they have been able to do that, and the reason the fiat system has lasted as long as it has, and why in previous centuries fiat monies have never survived. I mean, basically fiat money's been around for 100 years, give or take, 110 years, if you say the start of fiat money was 1914. You know, and other empires have attempted fiat money, and it's always gone tits up. It's never lasted as long as it has. And I think the reason for it is not so much the fiat money itself, but it's the incredible financial, technological architecture that has been built on top of the fiat system. So in all these incredible payment systems, all these incredible communication systems, and particularly since the late 70s when money went digital. And so, and I think it's just the sheer presence of that architecture, and has kind of, with even if the underlying thing, fiat money, is crap, the presence of all that architecture has just enabled it to survive as long as it has.
Salability through
and
space.
Thrive, and in fact, so much has been invested in it, the cost of it falling apart is almost too great. So it just goes on. And, you know, fintech is amazing. It really is. And it's one of the, interestingly, just as a side thing, one of the few areas where America, I see it, America slightly behind the rest of the world, is fintech. Like, you guys still use checks. What's that all about? And so Europe, you know, Europe is a basket case, and I'm not defending Europe, but fintech wise, it's I think it's a few years ahead of you. But in any case, it doesn't matter if you're in America or in Europe, and you think of all the financial technology in the bond market, and all the financial technology in the equities market, and how all these assets are exchanged and so on. And I think, you know, if you think how many text messages get sent each second, I think the amount of payments that go through each second is 5 times the number of text messages. It's just incredible, and it's wonderful. But I think that technology is what has saved fiat, bizarrely, that architecture. But now we're one stage better.
That's the salability through space, really,
And-
being able to send money across the world quickly.
You know, you said, Dominic, that the U.S. is behind. The truth of the matter, and this is an area you probably don't know
I'm
my back.
slightly joshing with you, but
No. You're actually right, and it's not just there. There's actually a lot of places where the U.S. lags. And I've been studying this for a long time. My background you may not know, but I was chief technical officer for a company called Gateway. We're a personal computer company back in the 80s and 90s. And in my role, I had to study technology and how to adapt it, etc. And what I learned was that by the late 90s, that the U.S. and the Western world was no longer the centerpiece of technological adoption. It could be, but it wasn't necessarily. And so 2 data points. One was, I mentioned my wife's Filipino earlier when we were chatting. And I learned in around the year 2000 that at that time, the average U.S. person was doing about 1.2 texts per day. But in the Philippines, it was over 20 text messages. And I went there specifically to study that. Say, why is that happening? I also went to Korea at the same time, where online gaming had exploded to the point that they had TV stations dedicated to online gaming. And this is 25 years
game
ago.
I played was on an online game from Korea.
And so the 2 fundamental reasons behind that were Korea, having a really high density population, people living in apartment buildings, was able to deploy fiber, high-speed internet to the home faster than anybody. And so they led this, you know, what we now see in online gaming was all, and not just the technological adoption, but all the social implications of that. And the same thing in the Philippines. In the Philippines, voice calls were expensive. And so as soon as texting became available, they jumped on it. And what they did is they replaced all the pagers with text messages, and they jumped ahead. I think the same thing's going to happen with Bitcoin. That's the reason I'm taking you down this in detail, because while the fiat system does serve the first world very well, and I think it'll be hard for them to kick the habit, I'm talking actual usage, the adoption in second and third world countries, Bitcoin, even Lightning or base layer transactions with their warts right now, is so vastly superior to what they currently have. And it connects them to the rest of the world that I think that's where we'll see. I think we'll see the adoption come out of those people first.
I witnessed exactly the same thing, Bob. I was filming something in 2015, 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I went to Seoul, Japan, all around Asia, Manila, Malaysia, and less so Malaysia, but where I really noticed it was Seoul. And I remember, because in my head, Korea's sort of third worldy, just in my biased Englishman's London-centric head. And then I went there and I was like, hang on a minute, this place is a good 15 years ahead of us.
Yeah.
And this was in 2015.
Right.
And for example, the whole of Seoul had free Wi-Fi.
Yep.
Just walking down the street, you got free Wi-Fi, the whole city.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, I can barely get Wi-Fi in my own house in London.
Yeah.
And it was just, and on the one hand, nobody's looking up from their phones. But on the other hand, which is quite sad, and you talk to Seoul people and they were just Instagramming everything and photographing and sharing. And I was like, whoa, what's all that about? And of course I'm doing it now. But at the time, my takeaway was this place is 15 years ahead of us.
Exactly.
And then to add to what you said, we're already seeing like I like to use the landline and the mobile phone as the analogy. And why did, landlines at their peak in 2007 was only 1.3 billion homes. And you kind of think, well, why didn't landlines go everywhere else? And it's because to get a landline, you needed a bank account. Whereas mobile phones, I think we're at 95% global reach now with smartphones. You don't need a bank account to get a smartphone.
Right.
And then once you've got your smartphone, you can do cryptocurrencies or you can send M-Pesa or whatever money you want to send. You don't need a bank account. And so it bypasses,
Exactly.
the fiat architecture is.
Yes.
And that's where people with shift derangement syndrome just don't understand that there's, billions of people on this planet that have no access to this antiquated, we're talking about fiat system.
And I don't know about you, a lot of people in London now, the only reason you have a landline is because you need a landline to have your internet connection.
Wow.
And that's slowly changing. And people ring on the landline. Nobody picks up their landlines anymore.
Yeah.
It's just
Pointless.
If it's just going to be somebody trying to sell you something.
They tried to give me one for my house. They're like, it's free. I'm like, great. I don't need it.
Yeah.
They're here, the Xfinity and Comcast. They try to put it in every little deal. They're like, you get this free landline. I'm like, fantastic.
Free
I
bank
don't want it.
account.
Are you sure it's
Never
free?
use it.
It's free.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. I don't want it.
We're going into a sort of high-tech Hayekian. There's a
Ooh,
nice rhyme there.
that's actually
world
a
and
chapter in Aaron Van Weirdum's book. It's called
High-tech.
High-Tech Hayekians.
Oh, well, good
So,
for you, Aaron.
yeah.
But of competing currencies and the best of the lot.
Yeah.
There might be one I'm sure there are plenty that are technologically better than Bitcoin, but none of them have got the network. And the network effect is
that
most
network
powerful
effect
thing.
is huge, and I will comment on that. That and why I think there are other cryptocurrencies that have tremendous use case. I prefer to save my Bitcoin and not spend it based on its fundamental, the discovery of absolute scarcity, only 21 million coins. Like if I have a bunch of different, apps I used to pay, different wallets, whatever. I have some small amount of Bitcoin in a hot wallet that I'm like, okay, this is my Bitcoin. If I'm traveling and I can pay with it, I'll use it. But I also have other wallets of other cryptocurrencies. And every single time I go somewhere where it's I need to pay, I'm going to pay with Solana. I'm going to pay with ETH. And I'm happy that there's competing currencies, and this one I want to pay with Ethereum and Solana, and I don't want to pay with my Bitcoin. So, and I think to the point where you're seeing on chain where more Bitcoin is, and people that love to talk about Bitcoin as digital cash, they probably don't want to hear this, but this is the reality: is that people don't want to spend their Bitcoin, at least now, right? They just don't want to spend their Bitcoin because they see the tremendous value in saving their Bitcoin. So I think we have to accept reality that Bitcoin has certain features that other cryptocurrencies and other things don't.
You
have.
called Bitcoin a currency. Do you differentiate between currency and money?
I do. If I was writing something about the difference between currency and money, then I would differentiate. And but in that instance, I called it currency, but I did that. It was a thoughtless slip.
So you would say that it's money then, and not currency.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's a great old rhyme from economic textbooks. Money is a matter of functions for a medium, a message, a standard, a store. great little text.
Mm.
So there you got your 4 functions of money: medium, a medium,
Of exchange.
a medium, a measure, a standard, and a store. And so store of value, obviously Bitcoin, we all know that doesn't need explaining.
Mhm.
You know, we use fiat as our unit of account because we have to pay taxes in fiat. And so we have to declare in fiat. But actually fiat is a crap unit of account because of the fact that the unit is changing value by 10%, declining in value by 10% every year. And you know, if something costs £100 in 2000, it costs £100 now. Well, it's just stupid because the two are comparable. And Bitcoin hasn't reached unit of account status yet. It might.
Yeah.
But gold is it's probably the best unit of account of the lot because it's just so old and it's been there since forever. And so, you know, gold, in my opinion, is the best unit of account. It's also a great store of value, but it's a physical store of value, whereas Bitcoin is a digital store of value. Then you come to the thing standard. A standard. Now, there's 2 meanings when they talk about standard. They talk about standard as in a gold standard or a Bitcoin standard. But I think in the case of this rhyme, they mean a standard of deferred payment. So that's kind of consumed in the store of value argument. And then medium of exchange. Well, you know, just using gold as the medium of exchange. I mean, I sent a payment the other day of 1 sat using Wallet of Satoshi. And 1 sat would be maybe 1/15 of 1 cent, something like that. And so the implications of that, I just think, are extraordinary because of this whole potential economy of micropayments and being able to tip, you know, instead of liking something, if you could just give somebody 1 sat.
Was this on Lightning?
Yeah.
It would have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
well,
number
it
was
was
just dust
no,
notation
it was
or
1 sat, and I just wanted to see if I could do it, and I just sent it from my own wallets, you know, from
It's pretty cool.
I think I sent it from Moon Wallet to Satoshi Wallet, or maybe I can't remember, but I did. I was able to do it, so you know, Bitcoin does work as a medium of exchange, and for cross-border payments, like you guys wanted to pay me for my flights, and maybe I shouldn't say that loud, but it was just easier.
You could say perfect.
But you know, you sent me a Bitcoin payment. It was just easier and quicker than
It made me
all
sad.
the costs of, you know, US dollar.
It made me sad that I couldn't just send it to you in filthy fiat. I had to send you
But
Bitcoin. I remember
so
thinking of
here's
it.
You offered. That's why I took it.
I would, yeah.
So it is a really good medium of exchange for cross-border payments. But
That's why we used it, because it was a cross-border
well,
payment.
precisely.
And I was like,
Precisely.
every other solution was like, oh my God, this is so fucking
Expensive, and all these
complicated.
leeches
so
have got
it
their
was
hands
big.
in the till.
Exactly.
But so it is. But if it's a bit like gold. You know, gold was good for high value transactions, but it was never really a medium of exchange.
That's how I feel
Metal
about
was money. You know, we used copper and nickel and silver as the medium of exchange, and gold was a sort of the store. But and then Peter Schiff will say, well, you could have a gold backed payment digital gold and blah blah blah. But you still couldn't send a payment.
We did have a gold backed payment system, and it failed miserably because it centralized into repositories, and they issued paper notes off of it.
Sure, and it was promises based on gold rather than gold itself. And gold itself. I mean, I don't even know what 1 grain of gold is, but 1 grain
it's
of gold,
impractical. Yeah,
it would be the size of it would be smaller than a barley grain, and
impossible to validate.
You couldn't use that as a medium exchange. It's not practical.
Yeah. Now, I actually have a question for you two guys.
Oh wow,
because I think it's Gresham's law, maybe in practice.
Yeah, I mean the problem with Gresham's law is you don't use the good money as the medium of exchange.
Well, but this is actually where I was going with this. So Maddie said earlier, hey, he has some Solana, he has some ETH. By the way, I own none of those, but I respect your right to own them, Maddie.
Thank you. It's the libertarian ethos.
But you needed to send money to Dominic. Now, you would have preferred fiat or Solana or ETH. And Gresham's law talks about when 2 competing monies exist. But what we haven't talked about, and often doesn't get talked about, is when does it end? It ends when the seller, the person who is receiving the money, rejects the lesser money and demands the better money. And so the reason I was asking that is interesting. You got paid in Bitcoin, and I don't mean to pry. We can purely look at it hypothetically, but you know, would you have accepted anything other than Bitcoin?
I would have accepted. You know, I was just grateful to have my flight paid for. So I would have
very
accepted.
generous.
I would have accepted whatever money was offered.
I'm a nice guy.
But I was, but because we were coming out here, I was coming out here to talk about Bitcoin. It kind of, it was almost like an exchange of, as well as being an exchange of contract and an exchange of money, it was an exchange of values, wasn't it? To say
It was absolutely.
So
it was a statement.
it was.
It was
exactly.
like, hey, we're both Bitcoiners.
It was like
that's why I did
a message.
It fucking broke my heart, but I did it for you.
And but thank you, Matty. Thank you. So there was a bit of that going on as well.
Yeah.
And I think you said I can either pay you in dollars or Bitcoin, and I said Bitcoin, something like that. You know.
Okay.
But,
So it wasn't a demand on your part.
No.
And I know you're trying to be an asshole or anything.
No,
like
no, no.
that. So I'm sure you would have taken it. But there will be a point probably, and maybe it's not with Maddie, maybe it's in some other venture where you may say somebody wants you to perform or speak or something like that. I'm the same way, where I may say, I am no longer accepting anything but Bitcoin. So I'm offering the service or I'm selling the good.
yeah, I would, in order to be in that position, I would either have to really not want to do the job. So, or I would have to be, and to really not want to do the job, but I'd either generally not want to do that gig or whatever it is.
Because you can convert it. You can convert it.
Yeah, exactly. Or I would just have to be of, such a status or of such wealth or whatever that I'm just not interested anymore.
I want to see your feedback on this.
But
because
but I don't. I would like to be at that point, but I'm not at that point yet.
Yeah. We've just painted a picture of two competing systems.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to come from the other side of this. I'm going to say, what if Bitcoin is the perfect form of money, which gold wasn't, which then actually fixes the fiat system, and these two systems actually complement each other. Bitcoin being like the hammer, and the currency being the nail. And I'll tell you why. Because if I'm going to buy a house, Maddie knows this, but so far my losses are up to $9 million. I'd be $9 million richer if I didn't buy my house with Bitcoin. So,
right.
So I made that foolish decision, right? So what I learned was I should borrow these crappy inflationary fiat units against my pristine collateral, which accrues value. So now I hold an asset that accrues value, and I borrow a currency that loses value against the collateral asset.
That's what Sailor does.
That's and speaking of which, Paul has this post pulled up here. BlackRock is buying Bitcoin. Soon banks will lend against it, just like they do with real estate. People borrow against houses to buy more houses. Now imagine that with Bitcoin. Borrow, buy more Bitcoin, repeat.
Yes.
A self-reinforcing loop of demand. The difference? Bitcoin is global, scarce, and liquid 24/7. The Bitcoin credit era is coming.
So gold was demonetized and real estate was monetized.
Yeah, essentially.
And now real estate will be demonetized, and Bitcoin is in the process of being monetized. And now Bitcoin will be, see, what people don't understand is real estate, besides U.S. Treasuries, real estate is the most important collateral in the entire system.
Correct.
So it was the financialization of that asset class that really brought prices so far above utility value.
Yeah.
And now Bitcoin is going to demonetize real estate somewhat. I mean, it's still a very good form of collateral because it's in the hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be a consistent demand on it.
But it's gotten out of whack especially since 1970.
The price.
You in your book, we didn't talk about this yet, but you in your book painted a perfect picture of this with, I think in Great Britain from like the 1200s to like, I can't remember what the year where they really started to debase the currency.
1914.
Whatever. Yeah. So basically up until then, it was like housing prices had gone up, I think don't quote me on this because I'm pulling stats from your book out of my head right now, but I think it was 0.2% per year, the cost of a house. It still went up, but extremely slowly. And then from there, it went up like, I want to say like somewhere between 6 to 10% a year.
No,
like
we've had since 1914. We've had 8% annual house price inflation.
I was like 6 to 10,
and until
like,
1914, it was 0.03.
There you go. I was close.
And that was since the 12th century.
So the question is, why did that happen? And is that good for the low-income people?
It's
fucking terrible.
It's
terrible.
This is the big argument that I have with people: is why do we have declining family size in the West?
Yeah.
And I know that we have declining family size because as people get richer, they have fewer children, and there is not the need. If you know that all three of your children are going to make it through and healthy, you don't need to have 8 children in order to have 3 survive.
Yeah.
Whatever. But the main reason given why people, particularly the middle class, if you look at people who have big families, they either tend to be very rich or very poor. And people in the middle, have the 1 or 2.4 kids is the expression in the UK. And the reason every family gives is I cannot afford to have more children. And it's because it's hard having kids, especially if both parents are having to work. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go, well, what is the biggest expense in your life? It is, of course, your government. So if you reduced your government and you had, instead of government taking 50% of what you earn, you got it down to 20% or something, that's a big expense removed. But after government, the next biggest expense is your house. And because houses have been financialized, as you say, and the biggest source of money creation is in the act of lending out money against houses. And so houses, and houses are a fairly captive market because of planning permission that restricts what can get built. And then you introduce shitloads of credit into that market, then you're introducing loads of money into that market. And so house prices will go up to reflect the new amount of money in circulation. And that's why house prices are so unaffordable. And then the result of house prices being unaffordable, people have smaller families.
Yeah.
And then the government goes, oh, we haven't got enough people. We need to import loads of people to get the so we,
It's
so
the
labour
it's
doesn't
the
go up. And it's
fundamental
just
corruption.
terrible
Fundamental corruption.
repeating cycle.
Yeah, and we were talking about Asia earlier. The pinnacle of that is actually Japan
And Korea.
and Korea. The same. Like it. Now we're at negative population growth, 1.1 children or something on that order per family. You have 58-year-old, single children still living with their parents because they've got a 100-year mortgage on a little apartment in Seoul or Tokyo.
Is that what they're doing over their 100-year mortgages?
Uh-huh.
Oh my goodness.
100-year
my goodness.
mortgages.
That should be illegal.
That is
should be illegal.
insane. Are you serious?
It's the only way for them to actually get the payment to a place that they can
is
afford it.
Wild.
I guess they'll become the people's reserve then. huh?
Wow. I didn't realize that, but it's like, it
That
reminds me of,
self-repaying mortgage.
So how will, okay, so I've got 20 Bitcoins. And 20 Bitcoins is worth, how much is 20 Bitcoins worth?
2 million.
2 million.
2 million. Okay, I've got 20 Bitcoins worth, of course, thank you. I've got 20 Bitcoins worth 2 million quid. I want to buy a house. The house is $1 million quid, $1 million bucks, sorry. Forgot where I was. So I've got 20 Bitcoins worth 2 million quid. I want to buy a house for $1 million quid. How does it work? Because I want the key. I don't want you getting your hands on my Bitcoins.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's smart. That's why we use multi-sig, because nobody should trust the counterparty with the keys, right?
So how's you're going to explain how this mortgage is going to
He's
work?
going to break it down.
Yeah. So okay, it's very personalized. So it depends on what you're looking for. So if
I'm looking for the house costs £1 million. The house costs £1.1 million. I've got 100 grand in cash. I've got 20 Bitcoins, and I need to borrow $1 million quid.
okay. And do you want to make a down payment? Yes or no?
Yeah, the down payment is
That's
100 grand.
Okay, but do you want to make it? Because you
Yeah,
do have an option to not make it.
The house is at 1.1 million. I'm putting a 100 grand down payment, and I need to borrow $1 million.
Why are you putting the 100,000 down just out of curiosity instead of buying Bitcoin?
Because that just sounds right.
He went to government daycare, and they
Right.
told him that's what needs to happen.
Right. Okay. So I mean, sure, yeah. If you want to put 100,000 down, go right ahead.
Well, I don't know. I think 100% mortgage is probably a bad idea. I don't know. Maybe tell me whether.
Well, absolutely. For the lender, right? So most people think of this through the borrower's terms, but you got to really think from the lender side. So the reason you're making a down payment is because the lender is saying, I'm not just going to let you borrow the money off of your promise. You need to establish some equity here. You need to get some cheese
Some
on
skin
the
in the
table.
game,
This
some skin in the
reduces
game.
risk. It's
Yeah.
about risk reduction.
Yeah.
You can sell it however they want. It's about reducing risk. Now, the next thing is, what about your interest rate? What's your interest rate going to be?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the broker.
Well, in the UK, what is it right now?
Well, you'd get a probably. Well, we have a different system because you get 30-year mortgages. You could have what's called. You would either have a 2-year or a 5-year deal, and you'd borrow you probably get 2-year deal at 4 or 5%, something like that, and that would just be for the interest, and so you wouldn't pay off any of the capital.
Okay. So yeah, it is different here because we have the 30-year, which everybody goes for, and you want a fixed rate, of course.
Yeah.
Because the debt becomes an asset.
Yeah,
instead of liability.
I think for the buyer, I think the 30-year system is a really good system, and I wish we had it in the UK, and we don't.
What do
Yeah.
you guys have?
Just what I said.
2
Interest
and
only.
5 year?
2 years and 5. You
It-
can get
you-
10 years.
No
And
principal.
these are
And then it
int-
changes
these are
every
int-
5 years? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I've
Adjustable
got
rate,
like
yeah.
I've got a mortgage that's coming due in, I don't know, August or September. I'm gonna have to renegotiate. a
That's what they
5-year
do
deal.
commercially here, but not for,
Yeah.
homes. That's like a commercial loan. That's pretty much how we
So
do office
if you came
I
here,
think we're better at raping our citizens.
Okay, gotcha. So, let me be your broker,
yeah,
CJ.
yeah, right.
Now, tell me what you're going to charge them. How much? 5%?
Well, it depends how much Bitcoin you put down.
It's
if you put
6%,
down the
Dominic.
$2 million worth of Bitcoin to buy $1 million house, we can give you 50% off the prime rate. So if call the prime rate 6 here, you can borrow at 3. But the difference is that when the value of the Bitcoin goes up or down, that affects our risk. Because remember, I didn't make you put a down payment. I didn't care about your down payment. I don't really want your fiat cash. I want my loan to be secured and to generate cash flow for me. So if you're going to put down the 20 Bitcoin, we'll lend you the $1 million to buy the house, or 1.1, whatever it is. And then what happens is you're going to get a lower interest rate. And that's the real kicker, because now your monthly cash flows are much lower. The burden of owning the home goes down.
Okay, so part of my payment would be the interest, and part of my payment would be paying down the actual capital.
Yeah, principal plus interest payments. Absolutely. And as the value of Bitcoin, because now, just like I described before, you have the money and you're going to borrow the fiat currency against it. Okay, well, you have the money. Now you're basically just borrowing the real estate against it. So from the lender's side, what we're interested in is, hey, if you default, number one, I have Bitcoin. Number two, I have real estate. So what's really happening here is that the marketplace is waking up. Lenders are waking up to the fact that governments are not the risk-free borrowers. Just because you have a printer doesn't make you the risk-free borrower. And what really makes you a risk-free borrower is when you actually have some type of asset. And in this case scenario, the asset we're talking about is real estate, which currently right now is one of the most pristine form of collateral, and Bitcoin, which is quickly becoming the most pristine form of collateral. So you combine these two assets together, and it creates a strong form of collateral for the lender. So if you walk away with my money, no problem. I'll sell your Bitcoin and give you a call and let you know, hey, congratulations, you own your home. Come get the rest of your Bitcoin. I have this multi-sig wallet, and so you can self-custody it. I don't want to babysit your Bitcoin. That's how we're empowering.
Okay, so let's say, so we got this 20 Bitcoin in a multi-sig wallet against a $1 million house. We'll just use the $1 million house and just forget the 100 grand.
And there's a lien against the property too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and let's just say, and at the point at which we agreed the mortgage, Bitcoin was 100 grand. Bitcoin then goes to $1 million a coin. So I go to you, I want to sell one of my 20 Bitcoins for $1 million and pay down the loan.
No problem. You can do that without penalty.
And I would do that like 5 years into the.
Yeah. That's one of the powers of the product. That's the whole point. We don't want to have to sell your Bitcoin up front and do what I did, which was make a really bad decision, selling those Bitcoin and missing out on the upside.
Okay. So another scenario, you've got my 20 Bitcoins. I've got the loan. Bitcoin goes from 100 grand, goes back to 20 grand. So my 20 Bitcoins are now worth 400 grand.
Mm-hmm.
And the house is worth $1 million.
Mm-hmm. As
long as I'm paying my interest and my principal, you don't have a problem with that.
None. This is the whole point. What Michael said is true. Banks are going to start lending against Bitcoin. But here's the amazing part. We talked about price discovery earlier a little bit. As the price of Bitcoin goes up, it incentivizes you to sell, right? But people, even with the price going up, people are holding more and more. What are they realizing? Or they're realizing this reality. There's no price that can incentivize you to sell your Bitcoin. None. When you have the proper lending tools. Because when you have the proper lending tools,
That is so true.
a higher price does not incentivize. Does Michael Saylor sell his Bitcoin when the price goes up?
No, he borrows and
he
get
does.
more.
Exactly.
He borrows and get
You
more.
don't
more.
you don't sell your Bitcoin.
So let me give you a third scenario. Bitcoin stays at 100 grand. The house stays at $1 million. And Dominic Frisby's career goes very badly, and suddenly I can't make the repayments. And I stop making the repayments. Do you sell the house or do you sell the Bitcoin?
The Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is the
I keep the house, you sell the Bitcoin.
correct.
So
or
you would sell 10 of my Bitcoin, get your $1 million back, and then the other 10 Bitcoin I get back.
correct. But what I would advise is to use our option where you can pay between 0 and 100% of your mortgage payment. So why force sell your Bitcoin to buy the home immediately because your career went bad? Sell very small chunks to just make your monthly payment.
And then the fourth scenario is Bitcoin goes to 20 grand, so that my 20 Bitcoins are now worth 400 grand. The house
Goes up 5%.
no, let's say the house just stays the same value. So, and then I fail to make the repayments. You would sell the Bitcoin and then the house to recoup the
Yes, and that's the worst case scenario for the lender
Yeah.
because now you have to foreclose, which comes with a bunch of default costs. So we want
Okay.
to avoid that, but that could happen. And if it happened, it really hurts the lender more than the borrower. That's kind of a
but
risk
you
that we take
you
as
would,
a lender.
You would get your 400 grand from the Bitcoin, and then all you really would need to make is 600 grand from the £1 million house
Correct.
to cover your £1 million
Yeah.
plus costs.
Yes.
Okay.
But they would probably
So this is a really
you'd probably be
this is a-
forced liquidated at 100%, correct? You wouldn't come down with,
It depends what decisions you make in the beginning of signing your contract. That's what's
So
great
as long as
about
you make your payments, everything's fine.
it. Correct.
Bitcoin goes to $1 million, whoopie do.
You
No,
can actually pull back collateral. So if Bitcoin goes from 100 to $1 million, you say, man, I could still meet this required contractual threshold with 10 Bitcoin.
And
I'll
this
take
is
my
a
10
this is a business you want to get into, or this is a business that already exists?
This is a business that we've built over the last 3 years, and we go live in the summer.
Okay. Well, I
I'm gonna connect you
want
to
to move to the UK, so you might have a client.
you want to move to the US?
Sorry, I mean I'm going to move from the UK.
This is why
Yeah,
this
we'll
is
see
why
you
we're
soon.
sending these intros down. I'm going to connect you to. That's why we're here.
See from the lender side.
Would you like if a typical mortgage on a house now is 5%? Is that what it-
No,
Six.
it's like 7, 6,
Yeah,
7.
6 to 8, depending on
Yeah.
on your credit and your banker.
Okay. But I give you 20 Bitcoins. What are you going to charge me? 6 to 8%.
With a $1 million house,
Yeah.
3.
Going to give you half.
Okay.
Beautiful.
If you
And then-
reach that threshold and you're so over collateralized that if you default, and all I have to do is make a phone call, say, hey, we've liquidated your Bitcoin. Come pick up the rest that's left over.
And if I gave you 10 Bitcoins, in other words, $1 million worth, it would be 6 to 8%.
The prime rate starts at prime plus 1, and the more over collateralized you are, the lower your rate can go.
Okay. And what's the monthly repayment cost? Paying down the capital on the house. Paying down the.
It's amortized the same way a traditional mortgage would be.
Over 30 years.
So if I'm paying £1 million house over 30 years, what would a monthly bill be?
Monthly.
Roughly, right now,
would
probably
be like
around
5,000,
5.
6,000.
Yeah, 5,000 because
6,000.
rates are so high. Around
Yeah.
5,000. But you would be able to.
Everything, or just the repayment would be
No, that would be principal plus interest,
£5,000.
and that's amortized over a 30-year period. So we would prefer to write it over 15 years. So be clear about that. I think 30 years is the higher you go, the more duration risk there is. So we want to eliminate risk. We want to mitigate risk, not add risk. Because
Although
the other
collateralization is really
that's the main form
mitigated
of risk
risk.
mitigation.
yeah.
But
Especially if it's extremely over collateralized over time. I mean,
yeah, I mean that's the whole point is that you want your Bitcoin to be able to create more wealth for you so you can get further ahead. And that's the only way you can get ahead right now. There is no savings technology or tool or debt instrument that allows you to increase your purchasing power year over year. Bitcoin is the best. Even property, S&P 500. This is just keeping up and keeping you even. Even gold. 1 ounce of gold buys you a really nice suit. 1 ounce of gold buys you a really nice
Yeah,
suit.
you did used to be able to. There were products where you could borrow some of the gold refiners, and also the coin dealers used to be able to deposit your gold with them, and they would lend you some money against your gold,
interesting.
like the old goldsmiths. But that's for some reason they stopped doing it after the financial crisis. In the UK, they stopped.
Well, it's because of the settlement cost. That's why I say Bitcoin is this pristine collateral. You get the best of the treasuries and you get the best of the gold because it upgrades the hardness of the gold, which makes it a good collateral, to absolute digital scarcity. But then it takes and that solves the problem of the treasuries, which is the softness and the infinite supply potential. But then treasuries were very quick, simple, and easy to settle, like you said. You can send them back and forth. Now, it's not perfect when you're cross-border, person to person, but business to business with the middlemen with their hands in there, yeah, you get 3-day settlement, and it's not bad. So with Bitcoin, we upgrade that. You get 10-minute settlement.
Yeah.
So you get absolute digital scarcity, cheap, easy, quick, secure, trustless settlement. It is the best form of collateral. When you integrate it into traditional credit and debt products, it changes the foundations of finance.
I think you're completely onto something, CJ. And if I hadn't written an article about it about 4 years ago in the paper for, I don't know, here, it's so funny.
Yeah. Between that and the Bitcoin bonds, those are
Yeah.
those.
it's really
I have
interesting.
I have personally paid the R&D on those puppies.
I love
By
it.
learning the hard way
love
about
it.
buying the
I love
house and by selling Bitcoin also to have a little bit of a nest egg to put in to lend to the government to live off the cash flow.
See, us millennials have some ideas too. We got some ideas.
It's just like that. Those are the two biggest problems for Bitcoiners. I want I want to allow my wealth to grow and reduce the burden of my debts. And then I need cash flow. And if we could solve those two problems, I think you're going to see adoption accelerate.
Yeah, because, you know, I like a lot of people, I don't know, I want more real estate than I have, but I don't want to sell my Bitcoins.
No, you'd be a fool to do it.
Yeah. And so, but if the more products like this go on, then the more your guys holding Bitcoins from 3.5 years to 5 years to 7 years takes place. The longer hodler.
Yep.
I think that's I didn't get to finish my idea earlier though, because
Finish it. Let's hear it.
what Michael Saylor said about the banks lending, and this is why we say you got to choose your counterparty wisely.
Mhm.
Eventually, what people are going to understand is that there's no price that can convince you to sell your Bitcoin. So the only way the big banks are going to be able to get your Bitcoin is if they liquidate you. So at people's resolve, we focus on removing the liquidation risk. Like liquidation, you can tell from was your worst case scenario. Like things have to go bad in multiple ways for you to get liquidated. You have to default. Your career has to go bad. Like things have to go bad in order for that to happen. But in all of the products that exist today, and I think in the products that the big bankers are going to offer, they're going to give you, just like with real estate, you can get like a 90% LTV. Like it's like insane. So yeah, you want to borrow 90% against your Bitcoin? No problem. Just make sure you have some extra because you might get margin called. And then that person's not responsible. They're not a money manager. They don't understand leverage. And then all of a sudden they get a margin call with 10% is nothing. You're going to get liquidated at like 875. They're going to take that plus a spread. And all of a sudden you've lost your Bitcoin. You have now lost your Bitcoin because you've been liquidated. And that is the biggest risk for Bitcoiners moving into the future. You need a counterparty who understands that and builds a product for you that protects you from liquidation, because there's no price that should be able to convince you to sell your Bitcoin.
And that education on that's going to be important, because shysters and scammers, and I mean, I would put people that offer those kind of loans on the edge of that.
Oh yeah.
You know, they're enticing people.
That's what we can see. Where are we going right now between 104? I've been a market maker in this industry for the last 8 years. And what you're seeing right now in this range is accumulation from market makers. That's what you're seeing. The reason we go up to 104 and shoot down to 89 is because people are using leverage within the system. They get to an over leveraged extent and they get to a certain price point, and the market makers sell down to that price point to capture forced selling. They're forced. It's already happening. The bigger people who really know what's going on, this is already happening. The gambling people, the speculators, they're being forced liquidated, and you're buying discount coins. Those are great days for us, bad days for the other people who don't make the markets. But if you're a market maker, this is what you want. You want volatility. You want to go to 106 and get everybody bullish and drop it down to 89. Because on the charts, 90 was the level. If I just protect 90, and it goes to 89,999. Why does it do that? Because all of this data is aggregated, and market makers have access to this data, and they want to force you to sell your coins to them at a discounted rate. And that's how you accumulate. That's how the big boys accumulate. These bankers who you think they create a new product for you, they're your enemy. You have to choose your counterparty wisely.
This is why we teach everybody just to understand the fundamental value proposition, that's here. And
this is why Larry Fink is calling for tokenization of assets. Arguably, Bessent just talked about tokenization of he said we were going to monetize the asset side of the balance sheet. Okay. Well, one of the ways you monetize the asset side of the balance sheet is you tokenize all of that wealth that you can't pull out of the ground with the gold and the oil. You tokenize it. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to make markets. That's what they're going to do. They're going to provide liquidity in the internet economy, because it turns out that in the internet economy, we have a free market yield curve. But in the traditional economy, we have anchor rates, and central banks are stating rates. So free market is always more profitable than price controls. So you have these big market makers. They've been pushed out the yield curve so far that they literally write and sell options contracts all day. Like they will set up a delta neutral options position to yield farm. Where do you think that term came from? Yield farming. That started in TradFi. TradFi market makers yield farm all day. And they use sentiment, probably use fake news too in that industry, and they yield farm you all day. But it turns out yield farming in the decentralized internet economy brings about 30% APY.
Wow.
In a neutral market. In a neutral market in TradFi, you're talking about 15. The best market makers are getting 10, 15.
I got to tell you, this is why I came from corporate America, and this is why I hate corporate America. It's why I hate Wall Street. It's why I have a difficult people providing products, services like you were talking to Dominic about. I have tremendous respect for, but what loses me is there's a line that gets crossed, and these people add no value to the world. They're just predatory,
Rent seekers.
and unfortunately, it attracts a lot of very bright people to that industry, to those methods, and I think they somehow ethically justify this stuff to themselves, or they're amoral. I'm not. I guess probably some of both.
It's both.
Probably some of both.
It's the free market concept.
And I know we can't stop it, but I hope as it is reborn in the Bitcoin world, there's better education about it than there is in the traditional world, and less people get wrecked, and more people deploy their capital. They use loans. They use this sort of stuff in a fruitful way, just like the relationship you were talking about with Dominic, maybe getting it. Then I think the way that it often happens, which is people using leverage to speculate or trying to push a deal to the edge to maximize and getting wrecked, because I think that could have a lot of negative ramifications to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It'll scare people away.
You're spot on. Well, wait until you see what happens when these banks use fractional reserves. You think they're going to go to full reserves? As soon as you put Bitcoin on their balance, as soon as you deposit Bitcoin to the bank, you are now lending your Bitcoin to the bank. That's why they're going to pay you interest. It's called, you get paid interest because of counterparty risk. So you're going to deposit your Bitcoin to the bank. They're going to pay you interest. And then legally, just like your regular bank deposit, they can do whatever the hell they want. There's going to be a very small amount that's fractionally reserved. And then what happens is on the Bitcoin that you deposited, maybe everybody at this table will have a claim to it. You put those 20 Bitcoin in with the big bank, and you put in 10.
I don't think fractional reserve banking can work with Bitcoin.
It absolutely cannot. But let me tell you something. They're going to try.
Well, that's going to go badly tits up, because there's no government at the end who can print all the money and bail out the system.
Let me tell you
It's going to be
why.
like all the bank runs in the 19th century.
They'll settle in dollars. It's going to be just like you for a FTX. If you were ever at FTX, it went down to 16. The whole system broke. A couple months later, it was back to 40,000. A lot of people figured, man, I had 15 Bitcoin, I had 20 Bitcoin. If I just get back half of that, then I'll be in good shape. Well, it turns out that they got back more than half, but in dollar terms. So yeah, you had 20, or this is called 10 Bitcoin. You had 10 Bitcoin at 16,000 at the time of liquidation. Here's your check for 160 grand, because they can print the dollars, but not the Bitcoin. Then you go back to buy your Bitcoin today when you get your money. I think that comes out on the 18th. Now you can only own 1.6 Bitcoin. You had 10, and now after the whole fractional reserve system with the rehypothecation scheme broke down, you get paid 160 grand for your liquidation value of the Bitcoin that you had. The banks are going to do the same thing. They'll go back to the Bitcoin and say, here at this price, they had this. We got to print this amount of money, and then legally we have fulfilled our obligation.
You're not wrong. I've seen it.
It's a scam. And in the meantime, they probably have partners and subsidiaries who bought the liquidated Bitcoin.
Fascinating. Dom, I pulled up this one for you because you were asking me about meme coins. So I'm going to give you a chance to ask the question. So this is a post from Eric Voorhees. Meme coins exist in part because SEC Gov prosecuted the builders of any coins that had utility from 2017 to 2014. By the way, to the earnest builders out there who have been hiding timid under rocks and behind trees to avoid Sauron's eye, it's safe now. That cool idea you had on which you seek so readily to stake your capital and reputation because you believe in your bones that it deserves. Paul, can you expand that quote? It's just the post right underneath the first one. That it deserves to pursue the pursuit, go make it happen. The environment is to a substantial degree safe again for the great impulse towards creation.
This is exactly why we built in stealth for the last 3 years. We decided, look, if you come out and start talking about this stuff when there's a war on crypto, you can be your own worst enemy.
Yeah.
You're going to put a target on your back and you are going to be destroyed.
Trust me, I hear you. I felt it. I mean, I literally felt it. I've finally did this media. Paul's been pushing me to do this media stuff for so long, and I'm like, listen, like you're working, you have a family. Everyone here has families. Like, you know, I got to be able to pay you guys so everyone can take care of their families. Like, you know, it's we don't have a war chest right now. Like, we can't even our fucking bank accounts are getting closed. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's hard to pursue those ideas, but now with that
rough,
change,
yeah.
and that's why I think this is so important. Like, and I think it's a good idea that you're coming here, because I haven't seen this in any other government, and it's going on just as bad.
Yeah,
to drain the swap.
Even worse, maybe.
The UK is backward, and you know, if you think Satoshi quoted British Times in the Genesis block, he wrote in British English. You know, there's a reasonable chance that he was British, or certainly had an affinity with Britain. And you know, all the early Bitcoin conferences were in Britain. I wrote the first book on Bitcoin from a recognized publisher in Britain. I couldn't even get it released in the States. You know, it was crypto. When it's not going to, just a thing. It's not going to be anything. So no. And
here we go. This one's for you, Dominic. The Europeans begged JD Vance to become president of Europe. Babylon Bee. Love those guys.
So, you know, Britain is just so backward. And I mentioned this before in a different show. The FCA introduced all these rulings to protect British investors from crypto scams, and it made it impossible to send money to crypto exchanges. And at the time, Bitcoin was $5,000. So now it's $100,000. That's $95,000 of gain that British investors have been protected from. We can't even buy Bitcoin ETFs. It's nuts. And we were ahead of you.
Guys, I've got a breaking announcement. A breaking announcement. We have a new all-time high. A Bitcoin flag is seen at the top of Mount Everest, the highest point.
Fantastic.
You thought I meant the price, but what I meant is
fantastic. That's been photoshopped.
the one above.
One above looked genuine. That's fantastic. Good for them. So yeah, we're backward, but it's just wonderful. But you asked me to talk about meme coins, and so my question to you is this: like, sometimes these memes cross my feed, whatever, Twitter, you know, and I'm a bit of an old boy. I guess my finger's not really on the pulse, but you know, some of them are really funny.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just so funny, and all the songs that go with them, and the little gifs and these things, they're just really funny. And as a comedian, they appeal to me because they make me laugh. And particularly when there was this real sense of rebellion during COVID, and that whole thing with Robin Hood started, you know, it was like, oh, come on. And then the silver guys jumped on the bandwagon. But you know, that whole thing was just great. And all those memes hold, and it was just so funny. But And I've got a friend of mine who he literally makes his money making memes for meme coins. He was a comedian who can't get any money as a comedian, and he's been put out of work doing voiceovers by AI, and he just makes memes for meme coins all day. And so he knows which are all the ones that are about to hit because they're asking to make memes for them.
I think,
and he's got one that had millions and millions and millions of views where he talks about how if he bought Shiba Inu coin, and he bought it for like 200, and after 3 weeks it went down to like $150. So he sold it for $150 and took a $50 loss. And if he'd held on, he'd be worth $3 billion now. And then he starts crying. It's so funny. But like, why? But like, I know Shiba Inu's funny and Dogecoin's funny and yada yada, but why are they not just tell me why we need them. Why are they not just total scams? And we just get everyone excited and then leech off the people who are getting excited and buying in. You know, why are they not just? Those really are pyramids and Ponzi's. Why do we need them?
So I'm going to let these these maxis take their takes first, and then I'm going to give the steel man the right answer, the nuanced, complicated, down the rabbit hole, deep one. So let's hear what you guys have to say.
I find them worthless, so I'm the wrong guy to ask.
That was the take we needed.
But
CJ,
but you know, I'll say that. I'll tell you why too. I understand in the present why they may have value, but I look at Bitcoin as money for the next 1,000 years. I'm confident if I have 20 Bitcoin and I give it to my great-great-grand, put it in a vault and it's there for my great-great-grandchildren, I know that it will have a really high value. I think the meme coins are as valuable as, you know, I look at a
collector's item, sort of, like
well,
sports cards or something.
But yeah, I mean, how much from, let's say, the 70s is actually valuable? An ad or a joke or something like that from the 70s. To me,
a toy is a toy, an original 70s.
Yeah,
you know, if you've got an original Jedi lightsaber or something,
I
don't know.
Something there.
It might have a little bit. But I I find it very difficult to believe that on a multi-decade view, many have any value. And I'm not even an NFT guy in that sense. I think there are some values in some NFT applications, but anyway, I think I'm with you. I'm perplexed. Maybe it's old guy stuff, but I just can't see any lasting value.
What do you got, CJ?
Well, this is the answer to this is actually frustrating and sad. And to me, it's because we, the people, have been disenfranchised. So we are not even allowed to invest. Matty gives me a call and says, "Hey, man, we got a great deal coming up. You want to hop in?" Well, I mean, I could now, but back then I couldn't because I'm not even an accredited investor. You know, I'm not even allowed to participate. If my friend has a good idea, I have to ask permission from daddy government. And then, yeah, I can invest in the companies that put kids in sweatshops. I can invest in the companies that send missiles around the world. And you know what? Maybe my $1,000 will turn into $2,000 in 20 years. So what we're really experiencing, in my opinion, is the final life cycle of the currency. The fiat currency is in its final phase of its life cycle. And because it's being diluted so quickly, people are forced. They're not incentivized to save. You cannot save. So they're forced to spend or invest. And then they get pushed into these tokens because of what Eric said, which was the SEC and other regulatory authorities came and attacked these because they're bought and paid for by the big monopolies, by the existing bank and central bank infrastructures,
Corporate lobbying,
who have to compete with being able to send one sat in 10 minutes. They cannot compete off the architecture, like you astutely pointed out earlier. So what do they have to do? They have to fight that battle that Christians and other conservatives didn't want to fight and remove themselves from that battle, right? It wasn't right to manipulate and buy the politicians. Well, these guys come from the opposite side of it. We're going to manipulate and buy as much as we possibly can, and we're going to drive as much value into our systems as possible. And one of the ways that they do that is ostracizing legitimate protocols, especially in my opinion, decentralized finance protocols that don't compete with Bitcoin as money.
I think so too.
But upgrade it to pristine collateral, like a Maker or Aave. Like these things, ETH, when it was proof of work, like these things had value because they helped Bitcoin go from digital gold to pristine collateral. And the system saw the transition taking place and how to fight that transition. It's going to fight to stay alive. And when it did, those people, like Eric said, had to go into hiding because you're actually building tools that are competing with monopolies. And the monopolies came to attack you. And when that happened, all of the efforts went into the meme coins. All of the efforts went into the shit coins. And it just became a big gambling casino, like it was in Weimar or any other country that you have this massive dilution of purchasing power because you're forced to spend or invest. And where else can you go? Well, shit. I'll tell you right now, every single day of the week, I will take that bet that I can turn $1,000 or $200 into $3 billion, even though the liquidity is not there. But you can turn a little bit into a lot versus turning a little bit into a little bit more. So, you know, in what world is a human being who's trying to get ahead? This is why lottery sales are so high. Everybody wants to get ahead. You're not going to get ahead turning $1,000 into $2,000 over 5 years. You're staying even. You're breaking even with money expansion. However, if you could put that $1,000 into some meme coin, shit coin, dog whiff fart and turn it in from 1,000 to 10,000 or 20,000 in a couple months or even a couple days, you're going to take that opportunity because you are incentivized to take that opportunity. And that's what's wicked about it. What's wicked about it is it comes down to the fundamental economic incentives, which are being warped and used against we the people, instead of integrating an asset like Bitcoin so that the system itself can help lift people up and empower.
How are you incentivized though by a lot of you're incentivized by a dream and a completely irrational?
Yeah, absolutely. But look,
like you put a hand up like a
it's harder for a solo miner to find a block than it is for someone to win the lottery. But how many solo miners have won blocks in the past couple of quarters? 3 or 4? That's statistically like it's unbelievable that that's happened, but it happens. So, you know, they have a better chance of buying the lottery ticket and walking away with a couple $100 million for a $2 ticket. Everybody takes that chance because they want to get ahead, and there's no proper savings vehicle. So I think, Bob, you're right. If we can educate these people about how Bitcoin is engineered money, it's a savings technology. Go from the natural to the engineered, and it changes you because it changes your incentives. You when you buy Bitcoin, you start to save it because over time you realize, whoa, this is amazing. Like I'm working a regular job, and now I got more money than all of my friends. I better save more like this, and it incentivizes. It comes down to the incentives, and Bitcoin fills that incentive void that exists right now because people don't know where to go and they don't understand it. They look at it as a speculative tech stock instead of an engineered money. So if we can get past that educational hurdle, people will not put the $2 into the lottery ticket. They'll put it into the sats because they know that sats are going to increase their purchasing power over time. And that's what makes me pissed off about it, because breaking through this brainwashing educational gap is going to be the challenge of my generation.
Yeah.
So all I'm seeing so far is there's scams and avoid them. Although you can get really rich. Now tell me why we need meme
let's
coins.
we'll do a little history and we'll talk about a couple different things. But here's my thoughts. I think they both raised some interesting points. CJ that really described this cynicism with the status quo, and I think there's a large element of that, especially with our generation and the younger generations, of just being super cynical on being able to ever afford anything. You know what I mean? Like a house, and it's just that element of it is apparent with meme coins. I think that as long as you understand what meme coins are, and this goes back in history, you look at every civilization has loved to gamble, right? Like I like to gamble. I know it's entertainment for me. Like I enjoy the entertainment. I understand the statistics. I understand X, Y, and Z, but it's fun, right? You have fun. People, even you go back to cavemen and they're throwing bones and, doing stuff. I mean, it's always been part of the human experience and the human existence, right? So I think if you understand that most meme coins are just a zero-sum gambling game, like I don't see a problem with it. I think people should be allowed to be adults, not be infantilized, and make your own decision, right? Like I like to take a small portion of fun and go gamble a little bit, right? Certain people do, certain people don't, whatever, right? It's a free market.
Shouldn't the burden though be on the creator? The burden is not on the gamblers themselves. Like I believe in free market as well, but if the government is going to try to protect people, you should be protecting them from the people who are creating the game that is designed to extract value, right? So let somebody start a mining company and let their friends invest, even if they're not an accredited investor.
I totally agree with that, and that's a big part of this. Is what you described as this whole idea of becoming a government, which is like a parent, like telling you what you can and can't do. And again, you're a perfect example of like the government protected you from the best performing asset in all of human history. The government should play no role in a free market, and America was set up so that it would not. I mean, that was literally like not its role, not its job. It was enumerated in the Constitution not to be able to do that, right? I mean, like totally unacceptable what's happening now. And like I've grown up and what the fuck is going on? Like Gary Gensler's going to tell me what I'm going to fucking do with my own goddamn money. But if I want to go to the casino, if I want to go fucking buy a scratch off where the government gets their cut, that's totally okay, right? I mean, but so to me, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. What a waste of taxpayer money. The complete opposite of the SEC's mission, which is not to tell people what to invest in or what they can and can't invest in. It's like to formulate capital to like literally they went against every single one of their precedents, right? So what Eric Voorhees had mentioned in his post was basically saying like the only thing that you were really allowed to do that wasn't actually, because the SEC was trying to basically say like everything is a security. So the only thing that wasn't a security is something that was literally completely stupid and worthless, like just bullshit, right? Like, hey, this is obviously not a security. It's a dog with a hat on. You know what I mean? Like,
could you imagine if you were parenting your kid?
Yeah.
And you see your kid come home drunk or high, and you say nothing. But then the next day they come home and they got an A+ on their math test, and they won an award for an essay they wrote, and then you discipline them for that.
Yeah,
that's basically what's going on.
And you might not even agree with the essay.
Yeah, you might not.
It's the government saying like, "Hey, I don't like the essay you wrote, even though you got an A+ on it or whatever." Like, I don't like what it's talking about. But so go get drunk and high. That's literally what the incentive was.
Even with everything you've said about the failures of government and the failures and the wrong incentives and all the other things. I think with the new currency, and I agree that in end of empires and money losing its value and people wanting to get on, you do create rife speculation, and gambling is a sort of end of empire thing. And
But no,
it's
it's not even. But it's not even just an end of empire thing. It's just an every empire thing. But
Sure.
maybe it increases towards the end of an empire. Maybe there's stats about that.
Okay,
It does.
but I think even with all these failures,
Uh-huh.
we would still have the national lottery,
Uh-huh.
and we would still have meme coins.
Of course.
So
no doubt.
why do we need meme coins?
So I'm going to go back to my history lesson here. So Dogecoin was really the first meme coin that ever existed, right?
and it was funny.
It was funny. It was made as a joke. And even if you go back to like Martin Luther, you go back through history, right? He posted these funny things. The very first attack against the system, the powers that be, were literally memes because most people couldn't even read, right? Most people couldn't read and write back in the day. So they had these funny memes and comics, and they would post them all over the place, right? So memes have been a part of human history and human culture for so long, right? It's a cultural thing.
I would call that satire.
Satire, memes is similar though, you know what I mean? Like it's the same idea of, depicting certain situations and things. So there's a cultural historical element there that is in large part historical, right? And being able to take the recent attention, a tokenized attention of a period of time and put it onto a blockchain and have it transacted, it is an interesting phenomena. I can't say whether it's going to be valuable or not valuable in the future, to Bob's point, right? It's like
It's done to extract
hundreds-
value.
yeah,
Though. That's the problem.
well,
it's created. It starts with value extraction at the base of the model. Like when we built our company,
Mhm.
we wanted to. We believe that traditional banks extract value, and we want to deliver value. So everything is built on the foundation of value delivery. Every single meme coin is built on value extraction. Every single one. There's not one
Well,
meme coin that
yes,
was created.
but
So,
then- but
so,
listen,
so,
so
let me push back on
funny-
that point real quick because I totally disagree with that. And the reason being is that there was a meme coin that was created, I think, a couple weeks ago, and it was a father whose child had cancer and he couldn't pay for the medical treatment. So all of these degenerate gamblers created a meme coin for his daughter and said, "Look, we're gonna pump this shit so you can pay for your daughter's surgery." And
But
sure
that's
enough, a
just
bunch of people.
that's just GoFund. It's a form of
it's
GoFund.
and is there not value in that? Is that a valuable tool to be able to use to raise money and capital quickly for somebody in need?
But the expectation of the person buying the coin is there's no expectation. It goes against what you said.
Yeah.
Because nobody's trying to get rich on that.
I mean, I will. We could all gamble for a charity, and we all put in $50, and we know 50 of that dollars is going to pay the charity, and the other 150, the four of us are going to gamble on, and someone's going to win it all. To me, there's value in that.
Value,
don't know.
Yeah, value
It is a
extraction.
value, correct. There's a value extraction to the charity.
Okay, but with
Is
meme
that
coins,
but that
when-
provides value to humanity, I think.
Hold on, wait.
as a comedian, I made this point. A lot of meme coins are funny,
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah.
they provide a lot of entertainment
There's value
along
in
the
that.
way. And then there's also the added entertainment of
Mm.
price go up. So, but I still don't think that's enough. But it's a
that's just
persuasive
subjective.
thing.
That's a subjective.
There's
thing, though.
nothing satirical or funny about money. You're trading your time and energy.
So-
your most valuable asset
This
is
is the
your time
problem.
and energy. You're trading it.
This is the problem with Bitcoin maximalists is that everything is money. But to me, not everything is money. There are things that are valuable to me that are not just money.
Let me go
So-
one step
all right.
closer though, because the guy would be able to pay for the cancer with his insurance if the insurance wasn't being scammed by the government the same way the meme coin creators are scamming their community.
I don't
So
think this
if we
guy,
had-
this guy was in a third
You
world
take
country. I think they
Bitcoin
even had
bonds
insurance.
and plug it into an
option.
insurance model like we're doing with We the People Health Share, which surprise. What's going to happen is the payments that go into the system are now going to outgrow the costs coming from the system. So now this guy can submit a claim to the thing for the cancer, and the entire community can now take a vote on whether or not they want to cover his daughter, who may not have been covered by the insurance plan. And through voluntary methods, you can give back in a way that doesn't come from the value extraction. It's like, does the devil do good sometimes? Because sometimes he takes an action and some good comes from it. I reject that idea.
I don't know. I'm just not following the logic of that. It sounds like what you described sounds way more complicated and that it would take way longer. When you have this system where the four of us agree that we're going to have a little value extraction, but we're going to have fun. And, the charity, some guy's daughter is going to get her cancer treatment at the end of the week, which would take forever with any kind of insurance, usually, even if it is approved, even if the model you describe, everyone's voting on this. There's a Bitcoin thing that does that, and it takes forever. It's like everybody's got to vote on, does this guy get to get the money from it? You know what I'm talking about?
But would you
know what I'm talking
agree?
about? What is it?
Would you agree,
Whatever it
Maddie,
is.
that the end game of this father who has this problem,
Uh-huh.
God bless him, hope it all
Mhm.
works out for him.
Mhm.
But the end game is a worthless token. Would you agree that? at the end game, 10 years from now, 20 years.
The
from
token itself, yeah. I mean, again, for sure.
Okay.
that particular token for sure.
The cause is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the process is still wealth extraction.
I'm just trying to
Exactly.
I'm just trying to describe why it could be useful, why there is pros.
I mean,
Again, I believe in free markets.
I'm a comedian. I believe in entertaining people.
I believe in it exactly, right. So
But
not everything has to.
but
It's a
even
means,
so,
it's a tool to use to tokenize.
but it's
some
well,
attention
it's a
or
tool of wealth extraction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're, in addition to entertaining people, you're selling them the dream of getting rich.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
I do charity
there's-
poker competitions all the time. where it's
Nothing
wealth
black and
extraction,
white, but I think
still
this
have
is
fun.
pretty dark grey.
Yeah.
Let's go this way, because the meme coin, the actual smart contract itself, is the tool, right? So is the gun bad, or is the person who shoots the gun bad? The gun is not bad. The gun is not at fault ever, for whatever reason. Okay, so I'll give you this. The smart contract's not bad.
Yeah.
But the people who created it, we know what they want from it. They're the bad person. It's the person who pulls the trigger on the gun that is the problem, not the gun.
So
Then
person
are
who
you a bad
issues-
person if you're just playing the system? You're just operating by the system, with the tools
don't
that are
hate the
available.
player,
to you
hate
at
the game.
time.
I don't, there's so many questions about. All I'm trying to raise the point is that with Bitcoiners, we're so focused on the money, and like money is an important thing, but like money is not everything, right? I find value in many things that don't necessarily have a monetary reward, or generate more money, or provide. I don't know the way to say it, but I just think it's interesting.
Is it fair to say that you find value in those things because we've kind of been like, especially you and me in our generation, we've been forced to mentally create entertainment from that process? Like, if I was able to save my money and gain purchasing power, maybe I wouldn't be as entertained to bet on a football game.
I don't know. I think there's just something in my soul that makes me, that I enjoy it. I can disconnect from the system of like, all the rat race of making money and all this shit that I have to deal with. And I can just say like, hey, let me watch the fucking 20 dudes. It's like the bread and circus. Let me watch 20 fucking dudes just go at it and fucking play a game that I grew up playing and that I love. And, I can just bet on one side. I don't really, I don't even care who wins, but hey, I'm going to put some money on this side because something about it is just fun. It's in my soul. It's fun. Something about playing poker where I'm strategically playing other people. It like gives me a mental break, and I find it.
I think that's great. I think that's great. I like to gamble. But I think we all enter gambling understanding exactly what the situation is.
And that's my point.
So if you look at these meme coins, and I think it goes back to what CJ's saying about the creator. I think the creator, not a legal obligation, but an ethical or moral obligation to saying what is it? If the end game of the token is somebody's holding a worthless token at the end, then I think that is a morally corrupt exercise. The Haktua coin, where there were some people that lost a whole bunch of money on that, I think they sucked in a whole bunch of people who didn't understand the game they were playing. They didn't know the rules they were playing.
But whose responsibility is that? Is that the government or somebody's responsibility? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
I'm not sure it's the government that should regulate. I think it's the moral responsibility of the creator of the coin and the promoters of the coin.
But like, I can go on AI right now and just say, make a smart contract of this, and like it'll spit it out in 5 seconds and say, oh, the AI made it. I don't know. I just think,
well, if you're
putting your money into something, and there's a different argument there. But if you put your money into something, like, you should be responsible. Like, I bought a bunch of I talked about this on a couple episodes. Like, I bought a bunch of fucking February 21st calls on MicroStrategy because I thought we'd have the strategic Bitcoin reserve by now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not blaming anybody because it didn't happen. I knew going into it that like, hey, this is a gamble, but it's kind of fun to watch for a couple. I get a 2-month sweat on like something that I think is probably unlikely to happen by February, but if it does, I get this huge asymmetric upside. Right?
It's also a
and those are gonna
agreement.
expire worthless.
An option is a contractual agreement. That seller of the option would be legally obligated to sell you those shares at that price.
Correct.
If you were in the money.
Yeah.
So there is no legal obligation on the other side of a meme coin.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game of hot potato. You're playing a game of hot potato.
This is something about the internet
Uh-huh.
generally that it's just how it is, but I don't think it's good. And that is, so let's say I was a confidence trickster and I was ripping off an old lady. And so I'm going to this old lady's house every day and I'm gradually playing her confidence and getting her to write me in my will or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And gradually over time, I would see this old lady and I would get to know her and I would learn her concerns and I would learn her about her life. And if I had any shred of humanity over a bit of time, she might be a despicable person and I might be glad to be ripping her off, but I might also warm to her and think, oh, actually, do you know what? I shouldn't be doing this and stop doing it. Now, when you're scamming people on the internet, you literally have no idea who they are. You could be scamming an old lady, you could be scamming a kid, you just don't know who they are. And so there's this sort of gulf of where normally your humane street would come in that just cannot exist because you have no idea what the person you're dealing with is. And then, so that's one part of it. And then the other part of it is because the internet puts people from all over the world in touch with each other, there are these cultural divides where it puts one person up against somebody who is totally ill-equipped to deal with what the other person knows. So, for example, we have this thing in the UK at the moment with this thing called county lines, where all the people from the cities are going out into the countryside and just finding bored, alienated youths, getting them to run drugs for them, then getting them into debt, and then turning them into addicts. And it's just turning all these kind of naive country youths into addicts using sophisticated city urban techniques. And the people perpetrating it, in my view, are horrible and
they're evil, yeah, for sure,
and ruthless. But in their eyes, they're just some thick city, some thick country bumpkin white kid, English kid, whatever, and they're there to be exploited because of whatever. So for example, the other day, a friend of mine who is actually a friend of my sister, who is just a sweet Irish lady in her 40s, lives in rural Ireland, from rural Ireland, very respectful, Catholic, just tiny little rural Irish comedian. At some point, she'd read something I'd written somewhere, and she got an account with Binance, and she bought some Ethereum, and she had, I think, 8,000 euros worth of Ethereum. Then she gets a message the other day, we've got a problem with your Binance account, we need to speak to you. And then they got her on the phone, and she said, and they were so nice, and they were so respectful, and they were so polite, and blah, blah, blah. And they had such nice accents, and I was so impressed with her lovely accent. And they just got all her password details and nicked $8,000 worth of Ethereum off her. And, she doesn't have $8,000 to lose. She's just some little country Irish lady who works for the post office or something. And so, but, this was some ruthless fishing expert from wherever he was from. He was probably putting on an accent anyway. Yeah. And he just took this little naive, trusting Irish lady, the cleaner. So it's like, and, I don't know where he was from. He could have been from anywhere, but whatever culture he was from, he was hard, he was ruthless, he was all these things, and he was exploiting somebody who's naive and blah, blah, blah. And those kind of mismatches are much rarer in the real world because the person from ruthless drug gang culture has to go all the way to some tiny village in the middle of Ireland, whereas on the internet it can happen straight away. Yeah. And so like I say, I don't say it's good, I don't say it's bad, I'm not calling on the government to protect us because they'll probably make a mess of it, but the internet enables these huge mismatches, and it's why you get these guys who find lonely widowed men and pretend to be young girls and nick all their life savings of them. Yeah. It's horrible.
It's a double-edged sword, man.
It goes on, and it's not good.
I've met
Larry says this, right? He goes, fix the money, fix the world.
Yeah.
So what we're really talking about is bad people, but you can never fully remove the bad people.
You can't. Yeah.
You can't. But what you can do is set up a society, a culture, an understanding that respects and understands money. And that's what we don't have now because of what they've done with the fiat system. The fiat system has removed any type of, you get your money, you spend it as fast as you can because there's no point in saving it. That's the core issue here. I think if that problem gets solved,
that's the Keynesian
all of this other stuff slowly fades away. You don't need to regulate it away. It'll go away.
if you remove the need for desperate acts too, like if you're faced morally, or you're a young person, you feel like the world's getting away from you. There's a desperation that I understand that maybe my generation didn't have, that some of the younger generations are facing. If you no longer feel desperate, like I have to gamble my last $200 on this meme coin because I need to turn 200 into 10,000, then I'm going to have to turn 10,000 into 100,000, and then I can start, building my life. But if that's the mentality, every time you get $200, you're gonna take this chance. I mean, that's as you said, Larry, who's a good friend too. That's what he's fighting for too. Is we want these people to have hope when they're younger and know that if they use low time preference behaviors, that they have a system that they can believe in that will reward them for that, and they get to where they want to go.
Exactly. Because now that person comes with this meme coin, and it could be funny. I enjoy the jokes. Like I think it's hilarious. But you would never tempt me to buy to waste the purchasing power of my time and energy on this. Like, I'll laugh with you, but I'm not going to give you my money.
There's part of that, but there's also the cynicism, and there's also, people that just like to gamble with a small portion. Like, for me, it wouldn't be my, like, I don't even own a single meme coin. Like, I've never even owned, aside from, I think I've owned a little bit of Dogecoin. That's about it. That's the only meme coin I've literally ever owned personally. But I, again, with a libertarian mind, I think people should be free to do what they want. I mean, that's really how I think about this. And like to talk about what you just described, like that whole situation, it's like the internet is like a double-edged sword, right? It's like, there's two sides, right, to every coin. Like I've created tremendous friendships, relationships with people, business ventures with people all over the world, people that like, some people I've never even seen in person before, right? Like, so it's been a tremendous value, but yes, there are the scammers, and, there's the downside of the internet, right? I like the answer to the argument to me, and the answer to all that to me is like, it always comes back to personal accountability. And like you learn, I help so many people that have come to our Bitcoin meetup that have learned that lesson, right? But it's like, until you learn that lesson, a fool and her money are always soon parted, right? But this lesson of really understanding, like she went and bought $8,000 of something without even understanding what it was, without understanding this digital asset, this bearer asset of it. So like at the end of the day, the responsibility, it sucks what happened to her, terrible. But like and this is what I tell people that come to me. It's like, hey, you lost 50 grand. Like, hey, I know you really don't want to hear this, but you invested $50,000 in something without doing the due diligence. This is the first time. How long have you lived in Naples? For 4 years. Well, we've had this meetup for 7 years. Like this is the first time I'm meeting you right now when you have a problem, right? So, and this is the difficult message I have to tell people. And like, it's just, I rip the Band-Aid off quickly because it's like, I've done it so many times and I've dealt with so many people who have been phished and socially engineered, and same problem, that you're describing, all these same problems. I've heard it a million times, and I just ripped the Band-Aid off quick. I said, look, you're never going to get this money back. This is a learning lesson. You didn't learn about this in school or any kind of education. You purchased a bunch of something without fully understanding how it's like buying a car and not knowing how to drive a car, right? And then like you get in a car crash because you didn't do the due diligence to learn how to use the car. Like seriously, that's the analogy like for the real world. And it is a tough pill to swallow. It really is. It sucks, right? But back to the fiat system, like government daycare, look at the chart that shows the expenditure and then the literacy going down. Like, why I literally graduated college before I heard about Bitcoin. It started when I was a senior in high school. Like, all these things that they're teaching you in school, the system is built for like to literally, there's that meme of people going in with like creativity and ideas and then coming out as drones. And that's literally what they forced that on you. Like I was jumping around trying to get out of my seat. So like when I learned Bitcoin and was like, holy shit, like I took a step outside the matrix and I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. Like I was in the matrix, and now like I learned about the history of money, like all the shit they don't teach you at school, because obviously there's a vested interest for them to not teach you about that, right? It's not acceptable, right? Because it realizes that you're in this system, and it all comes back to
meme coin smart contract creators run the world.
Pump.fun or whatever it's called,
and the education system.
But the nature of the world,
education needs to change. We need to start learning.
Well, everyone needs to be educated.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to learn. But the nature of the world is, not everyone is a dynamic, intelligent young man.
For sure.
And a lot of, but at the same time, everyone's reading, you got to buy Bitcoin, you got to buy Bitcoin. And so people do. And sometimes, they're they're out of their depth,
Yeah.
and because they're from one culture and they run up against
Mhm.
another one, and that's one of the injustices that the internet enables.
Mhm.
What I would say, what was so brilliant about Leonardo DiCaprio's depiction of the Wolf of Wall Street in that film was that he was able to, or what that film caught was how a really good salesman, even if he's selling dross that is never going to amount to anything, makes people feel really good about themselves. He makes them feel happy. So they were happy to invest with this guy, even if it was just dodgy utilities that they were buying.
Mhm.
And I think meme coins do that because they make you laugh, because they're funny. They make people feel good about themselves, and so people want to be part of it. And then they invest in this thing, and then they see the meme doing the rounds, and it's, yeah, I've got some of this. and so that same psychological process.
I feel
is
dumber
enabled.
just from talking about this meme coin for so long. Just-
So-
We should.
I'll wrap up one final point on the whole meme thing. And it's in relation to Dogecoin, which was the first meme coin ever created, right? So the reason Dogecoin was created was because nobody wanted to lose their Bitcoin. So, and they wanted people to learn how to use cryptocurrency, how to set up a wallet, how a seeds worked, how to send a transaction. So Dogecoin was created. The very first meme was created to educate and teach people. So people would go to conferences and they'd give it away and they'd send it and they use it. It had value and use as an educational tool. And the comment of Dogecoin basically said, like, this was a joke. I'm done with this. Like, I'm leaving crypto. Like, do whatever you want. And the community of people who used it and owned it and went to conferences to help educate people, they're like, fuck this. We think it's valuable and like we're gonna keep holding it and we're gonna have it. So like there is a
Yeah, I'm reminded
interesting.
of, you probably know about it, but back in the day, there was a thing called Scam Coin.
scam coin.
And he actually wrote the white paper. And he said, I think it was in the 2016
Oh, that's
bull
classic.
market. And he went, this is called Scam Coin.
Classic.
And he wrote the white paper and he explained exactly what the scam was.
Yeah.
And then he executed the scam. And people were pissed off because he'd run off with their money.
And you know
He was
what?
like, I said I was going to do it.
And that's literally, and again, and I think that Dominic hit the nail on the head there. Like, we're acting and thinking like people are being misled and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, like people need to have personal accountability. It's what's missing from our great Western societies. And it's, in my opinion, a large part of the decay of these societies. So if people want to like gamble and do these hot potato games and do all these things, let them. I have no problem with it. I think allowing gambling is part of society. Let's not focus on it. Like that's like what I think was really wrong by what the SEC did and how terrible it's been in the environment, where it's like, this is the only thing that's allowed in crypto. So it went to the forefront. It should be.
we have the most transformational
Yeah.
technology that we may have ever see or come across.
Mhm.
And we have people building meme coins and shit coins. It's so frustrating because we can literally change the foundations of finance. We can reset the human condition and empower people. And people are making scam coin white papers. It's
I don't.
That note,
nothing.
I
makes me
think
more
people are
pissed off.
buying it. I think that's the worst part.
guys, just wanted to chime in. We
Yeah.
have Ben Herring here commenting
Uh-huh.
at BJ Herring,
Uh-huh.
saying that CJ Konstantinos is 100% right that meme coins are gambling. This has been done before with zero value beyond gambling coins in previous cycles, and it's a den of wolves mining followers and marketing schemes to lure exit liquidity. Many more losers than winners. On that note, just wanted to pull up this.
Yeah, no doubt
from
about that.
CZ, the BNB founder. Matt, if you want to just
Okay,
kind
yeah,
of
I'll
touch on
see what
this
he says
last
there.
part, I think this aligns with
Yeah,
your
let's.
notion.
I'll read this all out, and then we'll leave it on this, and then we'll move on to another subject.
Maybe just the first
Close it.
two.
I
so
can
we-
see both sides of the argument, and I can't say I know which is right or wrong. Potential arguments for memes. Crypto is not a zero-sum game. Some of the people buying Trump were probably not in crypto before, so it probably helped to grow the space, even if just a little bit. It also validates crypto when the president of the United States issues a meme coin. Some people in crypto are pure speculators and seek volatility. Potential arguments against: no utility or long-term value, no intrinsic value, etc. Heard that about Bitcoin too. Short-term greed, etc. As you mentioned. I guess the bottom line is that in a decentralized world, no one is forcing anyone to buy or not to buy memes or any crypto. You don't have to get involved in memes if you don't want to, but other people should have their own choices too. I am a builder myself. I have not bought meme coins or NFTs, But just because I don't know how to appreciate something doesn't mean I am against it. And one thing I will say, which that just reminded me of, is we've got so many people that come to our meetups that we've converted that are like trying to know what to buy to get rich quick. And then they come to one of our meetups and we talk about Bitcoin and like all these different characteristics, and they're like, holy shit, and they start dollar cost averaging Bitcoin. And I got people texting me all the time that do that. They're like, should I buy Shibas or whatever? I'm like, no, fucking dollar cost average Bitcoin. Like you have no income to be doing this crazy shit. Like just fucking, this is pure gambling is what I tell them. I said, until you've got like half a Bitcoin or a Bitcoin, then you can gamble with whatever else you want. That's literally what I tell people.
Yeah.
So
I mean, does anybody see a better value proposition? Because you're coming from the gambling side.
Yeah.
Right? So if you have a gambling mindset and you say, okay, here's this money, it's being incorporated by governments, right? When we first started, like the risks in this system were ridiculous. Like there was no lightning.
Yeah.
There was no. It was just like really high risk. But now it's been so de-risked through its build out, and now it's so de-risked that governments are incorporating it. If I were a gambler, if you're a meme coiner out there and you're watching this live stream or someone sent it to you, look, here's the best gamble you can take. Sats are going to $1.
Yeah.
One Satoshi is going to $1. It's $100 million Bitcoin. Why? Because there's no price that can incentivize you to sell, and because Bitcoin is being monetized. Just like real estate was monetized and financialized, we are now taking those same tools, Dominic, that you said earlier, that has this expansive infrastructure built up around currency, right? You have the entire currency market. You have all these different types of debt derivatives. I mean, you got tools that some people don't even use. You got so many tools. None of those tools exist for Bitcoin. They're all being built right now. So we are monetizing and financializing Bitcoin. And when this process is done, all of the same tools that exist in the traditional financial world will exist being built around Bitcoin. That's what you want to gamble on. That's the easy bet. That's the big win.
Definitely the easy bet for sure.
Yeah.
I honestly never even, like, once I fully understood Bitcoin, I like, maybe this is because I have ADHD and I'm like super, like, apparently when you have ADHD, you die 10 years earlier because you take so many risks and you're so impulsive. But like once I fully understood Bitcoin, I was like, to me, it was like, there's no risk here. Like this is going to change the nature of money.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Like that's how I felt like in 2014, 2015, like when I first went down the rabbit hole, like I felt that way immediately after like 48 hours of like not sleeping and like fucking just really diving into history and looking at money and like learning about it through time. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
10 years. When you wrote your book, did you ever think that sovereign wealth funds would be buying Bitcoin this quick? Did you ever think the United States government would be talking about it?
It was ridiculous that Bitcoin had reached the same price as an ounce of gold.
You know,
just like $1,200.
You said something the other day that
just
was so
thought,
funny.
this is nuts.
You said you would remove the question mark now at the end of your book. That made me laugh. So is Bitcoin the future of money? Question mark. And you said now you would remove the question mark. That gave me a good chuckle.
On that notion, there's a man in Great Britain who is trying to purchase a waste dump site, a landfill, in order to attempt to recover his lost hard drive of 800 million Bitcoin.
James Howells, man, the sorriest man who ever lived.
Oh, man.
You know, we all know the James Howells story. His girlfriend threw away his hard drive and all there's Bitcoins on it.
God.
Way back in 2011, 2012 or something. And he'd probably be billions. There's probably billions on there
no
now.
doubt. He said 800
I think that's
pounds was.
I think it was hundreds of millions when I last worked it out. I can't remember how much. I think there's thousands of coins on there. And the local council, Newport City Council, he keeps going, can I look through the rubbish dump? And he's going, no. And he goes to the council, I'll split the profits with you. And they go, no.
That's
and they've obviously got normalized to say no. So now he's obviously raising the money to buy the entire
That's amazing.
rubbish dump.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I bet there's probably somebody of them, the council who's taking the hard drive themselves probably is what happened. But anyway. But he cannot get over it. And it's like, it must be more than 10 years. He's probably just, I could be a billionaire, and I'm not. I know he got heavily into Bitcoin Cash at one point. And that's probably, because he felt he had another chance. A lot of people got into Bitcoin Cash because they thought they had another chance with it.
That's the same attitude we just talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That chasing that.
I mean, poor man.
I want to ask you about gold.
All the people, I love gold. I'll talk about it in a sec. But all the people who made their millions in Bitcoins, there's probably 10, 20 times as many people who either had some Bitcoin and lost them, or didn't buy as many as they should, or sold too early, or lost the keys. They think 20% of Bitcoins have been lost. All these people have got some kind of, I've got it, some sort of, Bitcoin regret, Bitcoin, they know what might have happened. and it didn't. And you know, there's some dark depressions that have been caused as a result of it.
Well,
I got a hard drive.
I just recently lost a hard drive that had about 100,000 Hawk coins. So if you could help me purchase this local landfill, we could probably split that profit.
You know what? I had a hard drive that got all fucked up, and I did again. I came to 2014. I learned so many lessons the hard way. Like I mined the developer's wallet for Ethereum, like thousands of. I don't know if I told you this, Bob. Like
I don't know.
I went. Yeah, it was.
Not funny, but funny.
I think it's funny now. I mean, it's like it's like millions of dollars, and it's like I fucking But again, I didn't know, right? I had to get my education, right?
Shit,
I
man.
don't
All you do is
blame
control
anybody.
paste.
Yeah. The developer puts when you set up a bat file, like the developer puts their own
Yeah.
wallet in there. You have to change it to your wallet.
Just
So
paste the
I
right
didn't
one.
understand what I was doing. Like I'm watching videos online. Like I built a computer not knowing how to build a computer. I'm just like copying exactly what, like watching the guy in the video, like, oh, he put this thing here, he put that thing there. And like I fried like 5 motherboards because I plugged like the wrong cord in from a different power. It's crazy stories. I learned everything. Like but that's your education, right? You're learning. So like I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting all these Ethereums. I didn't these Ethereums. Because I wanted to mine Bitcoin, but like they had just transitioned from like away from
Into the
You
ASICs.
couldn't
into the
GPU
ASICs.
in it.
And I was like, oh my God, I don't have like thousands of dollars to buy this one machine. And then I got to hire an electrician to do a 220 volt outlet thing,
Yeah.
which is like part of why GPU mining has always been so near to my heart, because it was like, it's accessible for the plet. Like there's a GPU in the computer there. There's like, it's like anybody can do it in their little, on their computer.
Those were the first machines. I had
Yeah.
GTX
Yeah.
1070s, I
Oh,
think.
GTX 1070s, yeah.
Yeah.
My first rig, I just went to Best Buy and I bought like whatever they had on the shelf. It was like 1080 Ti's and 1050 Ti's or something like that. Like RX. I just bought a bunch of like just whatever they had on the shelf. And like I put it all together and like I'm just like mining Ethereum. I wasn't overclocking or undervolting. So like lost so much there. But then like after like a couple months, I'm just like, how do I check on this? Like it's saying I'm getting all these coins.
Where are they at? What's going on?
What's going on?
They're on the chain, they said.
I'm just like mining the developer's wallet. He's made out like a fucking bandit.
Wow.
So I learned the hard way. And then I had a computer like just like this. He's talking about the hard drive. And I guess it went bad. And like I kept trying to use it. And I guess like the way the old HCDs is like if something breaks or shatters, it just shoots around in there and causes all sorts of damage.
Yeah.
So they told me when they're like, you totally fucked this thing. But they're like, hey, save it because in like 10 to 20 years, maybe they'll have the technology to repair it.
There are some data recovery. You still have it?
Oh, I went to multiple data recovery things. Yeah, I still got the drive. It's in the safe somewhere.
2,000 Bitcoin on there.
You ever try somebody called
There's a
OnTrack?
couple million on there at some point. I think probably now millions of dollars is on that.
Wow.
There's a
drive.
there's a company named OnTrack if you've never used them.
I sent to some place in
OnTrack.
OnTrack. Can you text that to me? I'll definitely do
Yeah.
it. But
Not a
I
minute.
want to
I
ask you
said to
about
some
gold.
place in Canada. They said like
Gotta
it's
ask you.
totally
Not
destroyed,
in
but save it for 10 to 12 years.
Gold question.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right.
Ask Dominic.
So, what do you? This is like the big thing now. Everybody's talking about gold revaluation. Right? I even saw it on the news earlier. They were like, Trump could revalue gold up to 25,000, 50,000. I don't think people connect the dots that if you move gold to 25,000, then a suit costs 25,000. So, what are your thoughts on gold revaluation and integration? Do you see that as a way to potentially fix things, or do you think no, Bitcoin is the way we need to go?
Well, I think it'd be very hard to impose a fixed price for gold because it's the price is set in the market. But that said, the price is largely set in the paper markets, not in the actual physical gold markets. So there might be a way of imposing a price, or the US government could say, we are paying $4,000.
Let me
for
counter
an
the
ounce of
paper
gold.
thing, because people say this all the time and it confuses me. Because if the cost of production for gold, which they call them the all-in sustaining cost,
Yeah, it's about 12 or 13, 14, maybe 1,500. Somewhere
Okay.
down there.
so eventually if the paper pushed the price below the cost, then producers wouldn't produce.
Yeah, that's happened in the past.
So there's a limit on. I just want listeners to understand.
No,
there's like a limit on how much you can suppress price, because if
The price fell below the average cost of production in 2014.
and then
2013,
but then production slows, and then that
The production
demand
the
stays and
miners-
price goes
no,
back
the
up.
miners all went out of business. Most of the gold miners went out of business 2013, 2014.
So but there is a limit on how
No,
much you can
because gold.
suppress the
No,
price.
it doesn't. You're thinking like gold's like copper or silver or something, where the amount that's actually mined each year determines the price. It's not like that. It's because gold, all the gold that's ever been mined still exists. New mine production doesn't actually affect the gold price in the same way that the cost of oil production affects the oil price.
Interesting. So then does that apply to Bitcoin? You got the
I have no
CME
idea.
with paper contracts. Can they utilize paper contracts to push down Bitcoin?
I'm not sure. Maybe eventually if they get really smart, but I don't know.
What makes them able to do it with gold but not Bitcoin?
Because you're pushing me to say that the gold price is manipulated. The gold price is suppressed,
asking.
which is a very commonly cited argument,
Yeah.
but it's not one that I cite. I'm not sure it is.
Okay.
But I do know that the gold price is set in the futures markets.
Okay.
So it's the commonly said, in a typical day in the futures markets, I'm going to get this statistic wrong, but it's something like, and I know it's true for silver, in a typical day in the silver futures markets, more paper silver will trade hands than is mined in an entire year.
So if you could,
So if you extrapolate that out and everyone goes, well, if everyone just held for delivery, then there wouldn't be they couldn't deliver on all the paper gold that trades hands, and therefore the gold price would rocket up. But the derivatives markets just don't work like that because it's a whole buying and selling.
because then it goes back to the physical, but they're using a paper tool, right? So if you took delivery, then the demand on the limited supply would then push the price up.
That's not why futures were invented. The reason futures were invented in the first place was, Johnny with his tobacco farm in Virginia or whatever, wants to secure a price for his tobacco now, even though he hasn't grown it yet.
And people
That's why
want to
we
gamble.
had that's why.
And the buyer on the other side. wants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why the futures markets came, very practical reason.
Well, gambling
And,
too.
and maybe
People want
gambling too.
speculous
But that's
price.
why futures markets exist for gold. But the futures markets the paper markets exceed the physical markets by a considerable margin.
So how can they use it? If they can use it to suppress the price, why can't they use it to raise the price?
Well, the way they use it they could. The way they use it, and I'm sure they do, but I'm sure the way they use it to suppress the price is by dumping loads of paper gold on the markets, and then way more paper gold being dumped than there are buyers for it.
So
So
could
that's
they?
how they
Just
drive the
buy a
price
bunch
low.
of the paper and hold the price at 25,000? Let's just say
Yeah,
they
they
want the
could.
price at 25,000.
Yes, they could. They could quite easily do that. I mean, they'd have to print a load of money to do it, but they could quite easily do it. But then that would be manipulating the markets or something. But but what you're talking about, what you were asking me about, is that would be them establishing a price. Whereas back in the day, Roosevelt said he would wake up every morning in the gradual process of revaluing gold from 30 to 45 or whatever the number was. He would literally wake up every morning and decide the gold price that day. And, each day would be a little bit higher than the last day. And then he'd tell his treasury secretary, and this would be the price that America was paying for its gold. This would be the gold price, because it was possible to fix the price then. I think on one day he fixed it at a certain price because it was his lucky number, because 7 is a lucky number or something, I read. I mean, is that insane? But that's what happened. But I'm sure there's a way of, with this lot in charge and the level of the IQs that they've got, they could pretty much do whatever they like to.
Yeah.
In my view, they're extraordinary.
I mean, if you create that much profit between cost and market price, then
Yeah.
you'll send spaceships up to get more of it.
But if they wanted to say, I think the way they would have to do it, they would go, the United States is buying gold at such and such a price. The gold price today is just shy of $3,000. If they said the United States is buying gold at $5,000 an ounce or something, then the price would immediately go to $5,000 an ounce. And it would create the mother of all mining booms, because suddenly gold mines that are, at the margin at the moment would
Go
suddenly
up,
become immensely profitable. And so there'd be loads of drilling and exploration, and we'd have a huge mining boom. That's what happened in the 30s.
So to get to my actual question, do you see that as a solution?
No. Oh, as a solution, it's to pay off its debt.
Yeah.
Revaluation of gold. Yes.
So, but if you revalue the gold from 2,500 or 3,000 to 5,000,
Oh, it needs to go to like 80,000 or something.
80. Well, that's good.
Whatever the number is.
I was. So now, 1 ounce of gold is always one suit. Now a suit costs 80,000. So
Not necessarily, but
but if you pay back debt holders with printed money that was artificially created through value price control,
yeah, I
wouldn't
just think that,
create
that
hyperinflation?
commonly cited ratio goes. But I think your underlying point is, if they were to do that and revalue gold upwards, it would create a lot of inflation.
Hyperinflation.
Possibly.
Okay. I just want to get
I don't think it would
deal.
create. I mean, there'd be a lot of people who own a lot of gold who would start selling their gold to the US government, even at $5,000, let alone at $80,000. I'd be one of them. And yes, so there'd be a lot more money in the market,
circulation.
dollars in circulation, but the US pays off its debts.
Guys, this has been an absolutely brilliant conversation.
Sorry,
Oh,
Maddie, 1 second. I have an additional question from a viewer for
Cool.
you, CJ,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I understand Bob needs to go. So thank you, Bob, for attending and joining us today.
Yeah.
Let's meet.
And we got to wrap up here in a minute anyway.
Always great to have you.
Always a pleasure.
Guys, yeah.
And
Pleasure.
Bob, where can they all follow you?
Boomer_BTC on Twitter. Old Man Yells is my YouTube show. And Barefoot Mining for my company. Thank you, guys.
If you don't follow Bob, you're a fool. Follow him immediately.
100%.
High
Thank
alpha.
you, CJ. Thank you, man.
So to close, one question with regards to this post. Let me pull that up. Where did it go? Here we are. CJ, if you could just skim this over, and then I'll take you to the question directly.
I can read it. Bitcoin supply shock is getting real. Bank of Montreal 10x its Bitcoin ETF holdings, 13 million to 150 million. Barclays, the UK's second biggest bank, bought 131 million Bitcoin exposure. Two-door investment doubled its IBIT to 426.9 million. Now its largest position. Avenir revealed almost 600 million in IBIT, 2600% increase in one quarter. Wisconsin Investment Board disclosed 321 million in Bitcoin ETFs. Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund just bought the 436 million. Millennium Management 2.6 billion and 182 million in ETH ETFs. City and State Street preparing to custody Bitcoin and crypto. Michigan, Georgia, and West Virginia all pushing Bitcoin reserve bills. The level of adoption happening right now is unprecedented. Institutions and nation states are FOMOing in, and there simply isn't. Price will explode.
You should do the read over voices.
I'm happy to.
That was pleasurable.
Big players starting to ramp up as the 13F filings are showing. Does CJ Konstantinos mind sharing projections on his and other banking products in the next year or 3?
Yeah. So look, we're digital gold. What does that mean? We're going to gold parity.
Yeah.
Dominic, what's the market cap of gold right now? Roughly.
I think last time I looked, I think Bitcoin needs to go to $900,000 an ounce to kind of match gold.
That's where I think we go in the short term. In the short term, see the mainstream narrative is one full cycle behind what's actually happening. So yes, we're monetizing and financializing Bitcoin, but they're just figuring out it's digital gold. So
yeah.
I think in this cycle we get to parity with digital gold. I think
When does this cycle end?
Oh gosh. And if I knew that, I wouldn't be sitting at this table.
No, but I mean, is it like is it like 18 months after the halvening last April, or what is?
Yeah. Well, that is such a good deep question, because the way I think about it in my mind, and Matt, you know this from the BFE algorithm, but I created an algorithm that miners use to manage their treasury based on the commodity cycle. So the commodity cycle is really like a 4-year cycle where, like any commodity, you go from fair value to a premium, back to fair value to a discount, back to fair value. That's the commodity cycle. So based on that commodity cycle, I think we can get to the end of the year before we really would lose momentum. However, like the post said just before this, there's tremendous amounts of adoption and liquidity coming into the funds flows. This isn't retail anymore. These are sovereign wealth funds. These are nations. These are states, governments coming in. And therefore, I believe we're moving out of the commodity cycle and into a money cycle. And money cycles are always based on credit. So I think that's where we're really going. And in that case scenario, what happens, and I think the biggest players in the space fully understand this, again, there is no price to convince you. So what are we doing? Instead of going up and down to fair value premium, fair value discount, fair value premium, and so on in a commodity cycle, forget about the cycle. We're actually going to convincing levels. So we were at 60 and we moved to 100. There's a whole group of people who are now convinced to sell. We will now have market makers introduce volatility and liquidate, force people to sell. And when there's no sellers left at this level, I don't think we're going to like 1.8 or 1.16 or 1.25 or 1.50. I think we're going to the next convincing level. It might be 200K. We might shoot up as fast as we did from 60. Look at the volume, the VWAP on like the 80,000s. There's barely any volume traded there. It's wild. We're going to go we could see that same move from 100, boom, to 200.
I think so too.
This is the next convincing level.
Yeah, there's something in trading. A lot of traders use it. It's called psychological levels, right? Like humans are attracted to psychologically round numbers, like 100, 50. Like those numbers psychologically stand out in our heads. And a lot of people who are trading markets use those as support and resistance. Right? This is a common thing for any trader. And it just makes sense that price stop at those levels. Because
what price are most people willing to sell at? That's where the big people, that's where BlackRock's driving this. BlackRock is driving this to the next level to convince people to sell before they realize what it really is. And I think this process takes place until we get to gold parity. And then once we get gold parity, all the institutions right now who are like 1 to 3%, maybe 4% if you're feeling risky, 0.4%, all of that's going to disappear real effing quick because they're going to realize that the proper tools and infrastructure have been built in order to borrow against your Bitcoin properly with no liquidation risk. And when that happens, there's no price that can convince you to sell. And then we start to see the type of acceleration that I think Ben
I can see the wheels spinning in Dominic's mind.
was
He's
asking
thinking,
about.
I'm going to take away the question mark and I'm going to add an exclamation point. Now he's going to add an exclamation point to the back.
I'm taking out the future of, and it's just going to be called Bitcoin money.
Oh my God, Dominic, we got some of your. This was so classic. I know we spoke about this with Larry yesterday, but you got tell us about what you did. We're gonna put this over on the feed. I don't know.
Okay, so
the final podcast production
during the lockdown, I got together with a projectionist, and we put some slides together, and we went around various buildings in London. And projected slanderous remarks onto the building. So that's the Bank of England you can see there, and we projected money printer go brrr on there, and we also put Bitcoin fixes this on the Bank of England, and that's HMRC's building. We put taxation is a form of theft. Wow, and that's Parliament. What did we put there? Lockdowns kill more people than COVID.
You were proven right, actually.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I
didn't know that was you.
Overdosed and died.
That is awesome. I got to shake your hand again.
Thank you. They kind of went viral during
my favorite.
I remember that. I remember.
Tell them about my favorite one.
What was that one?
My favorite one, the BBC.
Oh, British Brainwashing Corporation.
There it is, right there. I love this one.
Yeah,
on the BBC building.
Yeah. Paid for by USAID.
USAID. Hey, did you guys ever get shit? Did any cops come or try to do anything to you, or did you guys get out of there?
Technically, I never actually admitted to doing it, but I mean, it was pretty obvious it was me because it was with me going, God, look what I saw on the Parliament on Bank of England last night, and it was like, and I was like, how come it's always you that sees it?
Should we cancel this feed because I'm very concerned about what's going on over in the UK.
I don't think technically what I did was actually illegal.
Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
Because I saw people coming and banging on people's doors for Facebook posts, and there's videos of this arresting British citizens.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I know. Guess so.
I'm being dead serious right now.
Projectionist is the new.
You're a projectionist. You're a monetary terrorist.
Vigilante.
You're reducing faith in the government. What is it? Or you're upsetting people. That's what it was. What you said could cause emotional upsetness in people. Yeah. So
that's freaking awesome.
They're going to take some pedophiles and murderers and take them out of prison so they can put you in there. I heard that's what they were doing.
No, he's fine. Here in the United States, we call that Mr. Big Balls. In England, they would call that Mr. Big Bullocks.
Mr. Big Bullocks. Okay, all right. He's not old enough to grow a mustache, but he's smart enough to expose government corruption.
Guys, please go follow Dominic Frisby's newsletter. You can find that under the flyingfrisbee.com.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely worth your time.
And also his Substack, which is the Flying Frisbee as well.
Yes.
And then he's also
quite a popular one.
Yes. And if you're so inclined, we're recording a series on his book, Daylight Robbery, which is my favorite book that he's written so far. And we go deep on the history of taxation. It's going to be a fascinating series because I fucking love talking to this guy. He's so smart.
Thank you.
He just takes you down so many cool, like philosophical rabbit holes.
Indeed. Lastly, go check out People's Reserve coming this summer, according to the man himself, at People's Reserve on X, and also his personal profile where you'll get the real download in real time at CJK Konstantinos.
Beautiful. Anybody have any closing thoughts?
Oh, I just want to say it was a pleasure to meet you.
You too, sir. Fun.
Absolutely. A lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank
I,
you boys very much.
If I buy a house in the States, I'll look you up.
Oh, yeah. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening, guys. It's been a pleasure.